everyone. Hello and welcome to another stream of Love, Money, Rock, and Roll. Today's gonna be a special day. Hopefully, we get through more of what's her name's adventures and stuff, Kagome, and maybe we'll get through like a bad ending or two. We'll see. And, yep, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be fun. I thought there was someone, crazy appearing at the door. But, however, it turned out to just be Michael. Weird, huh? Anyway, let's begin again, everyone. Lots of stuff happened last time. Lots of bullying, I remember that. Anyway, go. Oh, it's you again. I grumbled, disappointed. Good to see you, too. Why again? Never mind. Do you have anything you want to talk about, or are you just dropping by? I do, actually. Let's make it quick. I'm a bit busy today. He looked over my shoulder at the empty house with some doubt. It's about Catherine. Catherine. Thought she clearly told him not to talk to me about our friendship. What about her, our relationship? Can I come in? Of course you can. I grumbled again, not even trying to hide my irritation. Tea? Coffee? No, thank you. He patiently pretended not to notice my sarcasm. Then I'm listening very carefully. I talked to Catherine today. Glad to hear she talks to someone, at least. Nick, I like her. That's why I'm here. I understand you used to be in a relationship. How's the volume? Okay, volume is normal. Cool. Relationship. But not anymore. Finally, Michael expressed at least some emotion and frowned. You don't seem to be surprised at all. I could guess it all from your face. My voice sounded unsure, but I couldn't just tell him I eavesdropped on their conversation. I never noticed you were so perceptive. You got a problem with that? No, it's just an observation. Intentionally or not, Michael was beginning to aggravate me. Let me continue. If you don't mind, I'd like to try. Do you need my permission? I need to know that nothing would change between us afterwards. At first I couldn't understand what the hell he was doing this for. Michael seemed to be stuck. With some idea of chivalry that had been outdated for a good 500 years now. But then I realized the situation was far more banal. He was just trying to account for every possible scenario. If Catherine were to agree, someone could think he'd shamelessly taken advantage of a temporary breakup. After all, we were in Japan. With this, he would be off the hook. Permission granted, no objections left. So you need my blessing, not my permission. I smirked and, for some reason, put a kettle on the stove. I don't think the choice of words changes the point. Yeah, except not being a priest, I can't give you any absolution. If you see it that way, I just don't get the point of this conversation. Then you're against it? Jesus, what difference does it make if I'm for or against it? If I say I mind, are you going to leave her alone? Need to know it in advance. He didn't answer the question. In the end, it'll be up to Catherine to make the decision. And what the hell are we discussing here? He almost shouted. Most likely, it wasn't so much about Michael himself as about the fact that his stupid interrogation has reopened an old wound. Lately, though, about Alien Kagome had helped me avoid the unresolved situation with Katya, and most importantly, I was okay with that. Maybe I wouldn't even mind for things to stay this way forever. Catherine would continue to exist in a sort of superposition. Everything would be seemingly lost long over between us. But at the same time, she'd be. Within arm's reach, I could just approach her and start a silly conversation about the weather. Nick, I've come to you as a friend. Have you? Then what would you say if you were in my shoes? Depends on what I felt at the moment. What he felt. I grumbled and took the kettle filled with boiling water off the burner. But Michael also had a point. My answer would hardly matter. Most likely, I just didn't have the courage to admit to myself that I was afraid to move on. I'm very glad she came back. I really am. Oh? He raised his eyebrows. Otherwise, I would have suffered God knows how much longer because of a person that no longer exists. No longer exists? You think you know her? No, but I'd like to. Try not to be disappointed. That's resentment talking. Yes, Misha, exactly that. I got annoyed. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to be feeling here? I'm a human being, not an android like you. Michael didn't react to my insult. Apparently he'd come prepared with an infinite amount of patience. So sort it out between Catherine and yourself without dragging me into it. Does that mean you don't mind our relationship? Do whatever you want. I don't give a damn. I waved my hand. and I wouldn't dare to take any more of your time. I'll find the exit. His hypocritical good manners made me flinch, and it took a significant conscious effort to restrain myself from throwing something heavy at him. I threw something heavy at him. So what just happened? Had I abandoned any hope of getting together with Catherine ever again? Even though that was one of the most obvious explanations, something about it seemed fundamentally wrong. If Catherine started dating someone else, or if she had been dating before in the US, could that fact itself change my feelings? I doubted it. It'd be more like additional fuel in my stove of self-flagellation, but no more than that. For right now I felt no sadness or sorrow, only resentment, as if something important had been taken from me. Was it Catherine? She'd successfully done it herself a year and a half ago. Now it was more correct to say that I was stripping myself of feelings that had been hurting me for so long. Hey, Mafia Babe! Mafia Babe, welcome to the morning stream. I know it's been a while, but welcome back to the morning streams. It's good to see ya. The most frightening revelation was that deep inside I liked it. I felt like I was throwing a 100-pound bag with old junk off my shoulders. The endless angsty introspection brought a feeling of pulsating pressure to my head, as if someone had to put a flat ball inside of my skull and started pumping it up. Good to be here. I'm glad you're here. You missed a fair bit the last 2 times. Kagome is being bullied right now by Ellie's friends. But I think that's over now, and now we're just trying to figure out what to do next. Luckily, I didn't suffer from solips, and I knew the world around me continued to exist despite my internal turmoil. Kagome still wasn't picking up. I was getting seriously worried and decided that Gifts of the Sea couldn't do without a personal visit from me. But what if everything was alright, and there was just some problem with the line? As I imagined Kagome's annoyed face, her indignant voice sounded in my head. Looks like it's high time to panic. Yeah, I'm not in too much danger with my life right now, but you never know. I could drop dead at any second, Mafia Babe. I was aimlessly walking from one room to another, and at some point, my eyes stopped at the bass guitar that was patiently waiting for its moment. Could I even think about it after the conversation I had with Kobayashi Jun today? But was that the only reason for my hesitation? Not for Kobayashi Corporation and the KGB? Would I have agreed without a second thought? What about Catherine? Alright, let's say that after the conversation with Michael, her issue was resolved. Resolved that easily? I smirked and picked up the bass. What about Kagome? Of course, if I were to take Kobayashi Corporation out of the equation, the factor that had fostered our acquaintance would be gone too. For some reason, this thought made me uncomfortable, but I was even more exasperated by the thought that I wasn't in control of my life. If Ellie had asked me to become a bass player just a month ago, would I have refused? Oh, Ellie wants me to join her band for a bit. So there we go. Finally getting some Ellie scenes. What a poor choice of the moment. A feast in time of plague. Not to mention that Ellie knew I was going through a rough period in life. But do people always come across these opportunities only when they're ready for them? I completely lost track of time, frenziedly playing the same part until evening. The song I'd been rehearsing yesterday with Z Feelsy. Soon enough, I rubbed my fingertips raw, but I didn't care. I felt as if I was running away from something, trying to suppress my thoughts with the low frequencies of the bass guitar. The thought that, no matter how dearly I wanted to stand on the same stage as Ellie, the dream would never come true. When it was completely dark outside, someone rang the doorbell. I was so tired of looking for enemies everywhere that I just walked to open it, forgetting to think about all the possible dangers that could be waiting on my doorstep. And it turned out this was when I should have been most cautious. Uh-oh. It's Kagome and her grandfather. The night guest was Kagome. Not alone either, but accompanied by her grandfather. There were bags and bags in their hands, and they both looked tired and worn out. To what do I owe the honor? Our restaurant burned down. What? Kagome finally forced out without raising her hand. Your restaurant burned down? I slowly repeated, trying to understand the meaning of the words. Why? Because it was made of wood. Oh, right. Just don't know how to react to something like that and kept standing there dumbfounded. The old man apparently didn't really understand what was happening and what he was doing here. I'm very sorry. Was it an accident? Will you let us in? Why? We've got nowhere else to go. In their hands, Kagome and her grandfather held the meager possessions they'd managed to save from the fire. I was starting to see what had happened, but if I couldn't even figure out my own life, can I really afford to let victims of a fire stay at my place? Well, of course, come in. I couldn't chase them away in a situation like this either. They could at least spend the night, and we'd think of something in the morning. Holy crap, guys. A freaking fire now? Hang on a minute. The music sounds low to me for some reason. Is my hearing like fading? The old man sat at the kotatsu and immediately fell asleep while Kagome sat at the kitchen table, tensely unpacking their belongings. Oh, you know what? I know what I did. Settings. I remember what I did. I lowered the volume to get an end thingy. Okay. Here we go. The old man sat at the kotatsu and immediately fell asleep while Kagome sat at the kitchen table, tensely unpacking their belongings. I was walking back and forth, not knowing what to do. What happened? Are you going to tell me? Kawashima and Asakura came to me yesterday night, so I was wrong. After all, they had decided to wait. And they just came in, poured petrol all over your door. Of course not, she said angrily and put the bag aside. They came to confront me, but I kicked them out, and they promised to take revenge. And this morning we woke up smelling smoke. Are you sure that they're the ones who did it? Breaking windows and painting obscene characters is one thing. Setting houses on fire is another entirely. Are you asking if I have any evidence? Kagome replied in a surprisingly calm voice. No, I didn't, and I am sure that the police won't find anything either. Even if they do, they'll just bury the case. I see. You see? You see what? Is that all you can say? What else could I possibly say? Naturally, I didn't enjoy the fact that her and her grandfather had come to my house without warning. We're planning to stay here for an indefinite period of time, and still managed to find something to complain about. In the end, I decided to be tactful and not react to her words. At least today. Acting like the real knight in shining armor, did you? Protect me from bullying? Are you happy now? On the other hand, if you don't like it here, take responsibility. She got mad and even woke her grandfather up for a moment, although he just raised his head, looked around with sleepy eyes, and immediately fell asleep again. You and your problems are the last thing I need right now. It's your fault. Sure it is. Who else would you have to blame, except for yourself for not being able to keep your mouth shut? Yeah? Weren't you oh so convincingly telling me yesterday that I should be able to stand up for myself? And where did that get me? Shouldn't have gone that far. Who could have known they were capable of something like that? She was right. Nobody did. Moreover, I wasn't even sure the arson was their doing. What would you have done in my place? Well, first I wouldn't have gone so far. Of course, it's my own fault for not managing to take a bunch of rich assholes down a peg. Nobody's blaming you. I responded, but my voice lacked confidence. Would I really be able to stand up for myself in her place? After all, Asakura and Kawashima had plenty of friends and could count on the silent approval of the entire school. Perhaps my only difference from Kagome was that I wasn't as well suited to the role of the victim, but if they had chosen me, as a result of some twisted thought process, and then I got that tugging feeling of guilt again, the feeling that I had involuntarily brought an already unpleasant situation to its boiling point, arguing in front of the entire school, public humiliation of Asakura by Kagome. Could she forgive that? I guess not. Good thing everyone at least stayed alive. Fine, I agree, you're right. Shouldn't have approached things so hastily. Good. She scoffed, stood up, walked to the fridge, opened it, and winced. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to make dinner. I was quite satisfied with Himitsu's cooking, although she wasn't cooking much these days, and I sure hadn't planned on getting a new chef, but I tried to find at least something positive about the situation. It's delicious. Even the old man woke up for dinner. Your name is Nico-kun, I think? Yes. Thank you for letting us stay, Nico-kun. We don't have any relatives in Tokyo, and all our money burned in the fire, so we couldn't even stay at a hotel. Somehow Kagome hadn't even mentioned the money. Was I supposed to pay for them too? I'm really sorry. My conscience prevented me from taking out my indignation on this nice, harmless old man. He of all people was blameless. I have a sister. She lives in Hokkaido. As soon as I contact her, we'll leave right away. I won't bother you any longer. No, it's fine. I live alone anyway. What about your parents? They died in a car accident a year and a half ago. Oh, I'm very sorry. So young and already all alone. Although I was even younger when... Granddad, nobody wants to hear that. Kagome interrupted him rudely, having not even touched the food. He just sighed in response. Apparently he was used to such treatment. Strangers don't care about 100-year-old stories. But Kagome-chan, someone who helped you in a difficult situation, is no longer a stranger. She just scoffed and turned away. You must forgive her, Nico-kun. Kagome has been living with her mother almost her entire life. We haven't talked much, only when her mother died. Granddad! Kagome growled, and the old man had to stop. Even though I would have gladly listened to what he had to say. As he said, we aren't planning to stay any longer than necessary. When we finished eating, Kagome washed the dishes without saying a word, while I took a couple old futons out of a closet and put them in the empty room where my parents used to sleep. The old man immediately went to bed, while Kagome and I returned to the kitchen. Are you really going to give up everything and move to Hokkaido? What about your father? Of course not, but grandfather is already having it hard enough. The restaurant was his life's work. Left alone with me, Kagome started to act much calmer. Meaning? What? That you're going to stay here for an indefinite period of time? Maybe. Does that bother you? How should I put it? Hang on a second, guys. Guyses. Right. Here we go. How should I put it? I'd already somewhat recovered from the shock and came to terms with the fact that I'd probably need to spend at least some time living under the same roof as Kagome. Do you hate my company that much? What does it have to do? What if showed up at your restaurant yesterday and said that my house burned down and I was going to live there? But we don't have any free rooms, or didn't have any free rooms, and you've got a mansion. That's all you're looking for. You could have gone to Ellie's place, I grumbled out. She must have a palace. How's she doing, by the way? Kagome asked without a hint of resentment. How am I supposed to know? Really? She smiled for the first time. Listen, I've had more than enough experiences for today. I'm going to sleep. Good night. Good night. What, that's it? You aren't going to argue or talk back to me? No, I'm going to sleep too. I tossed and turned in bed for a while, trying to somehow sort out all the events of the day in my head. Well, one thing was clear. Ellie would have to find another bass player. Sorry, Ellie. Our band time is cancelled. Anyway, it's the 20th, okay? Okay, guys, alright? Sometimes when you wake up, you really want to finish watching a dream that had abruptly ended. Sometimes you just want to keep on sleeping because you don't feel rested enough. And on some occasions, you don't want to get up at all. That was me this morning. I wanted to rest and dream a bit more. I couldn't even remember the last time I woke up chipper and full of energy, jumped out of bed and greeted the new day with a big smile. But today, I opened my eyes and immediately felt as if there was a cloudy liquid spilling from one side of my head to the other each time I moved it. The memories didn't come back right away. You too? Yeah, that's how it goes. Viscous like tar, they brought back the events of yesterday I had successfully forgotten overnight. Just wanted to turn to the other side and fall asleep again, but that's when new sounds from the kitchen entered my consciousness. With some effort, I managed to get up, put some clothes on, opened the door slightly, and stuck my head out. Kagome was cooking breakfast with a smile on her face I'd never seen before. The serene smile of a person doing what they love. Good morning! I walked into the kitchen, wiping my eyes and smothering my messy hair. Good morning. Kagome turned to me, still smiling for a moment, but then turned serious, preparing to discuss important matters. Won't your grandfather be having breakfast with us? He went to the police station early in the morning. Ah, I see. After waking up, I usually needed some time to come to my senses, so right now I had absolutely no idea what to talk about, especially with someone I didn't know that well. Alright then, and I walked away to freshen up. There was a new towel drying in the bathroom, as well as a new tube of toothpaste and 2 toothbrushes on the shelf next to the mirror. In principle, there was nothing wrong with that, but I was a little alarmed by Kagome's arrogance. When I returned to the kitchen, the breakfast was already on the table. "Have a good meal," I said across Kagome, and without saying a word, put a solid portion of rice in my bowl. It seemed that my new roommate didn't like to talk while eating dinner, but breakfast turned out to be exceptionally tasty, and I couldn't help but remark on that. "You must want to become a chef." "What makes you think that?" she asked without even looking at me. "Well, you're really good at it, so I thought. Many people cook well, but the economy doesn't need that many chefs. Are you into economics?" "You could say that. So you want to be an economist?" "I'm planning to enroll into the economics department at Todai." She responded calmly, as if talking about her plans for the evening. "Todai?" I was surprised. "Yes, why? I could imagine Ellie or Michael at Todai, maybe even Kyosuke." BRB, alrighty, Mafia. Nothing, I guess. I just never thought about Todai. It must be difficult to get in there. You just need to pass the exams. Just. I smirked, but realized that Kagome was more or less right. After all, those exams were meant to be a way to find the best of the best, not an insurmountable barrier. "Alright, sorry. It's just that for me, Todai is something like..." "I can see that." Kagome smirked and looked to me in the eye for the first time. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Only that you have a clear understanding of your own abilities." Kagome's words sounded offensive, but there was nothing to latch onto. She was just stating a fact. "Fine, now tell me, what are you going to do next?" "Next? About your restaurant, about Kawashima and Asakura, about your father." She shrugged and started picking at the last grains of rice with her chopsticks. "Right, now it's all my responsibility, is that it?" I asked sarcastically, but Kagome didn't react in any way. "Yesterday, your granddad said that you have no money left. How much do you need?" "Wait, I'll go get my wallet." I jumped up from the chair and really was about to go get her some money. "Nico-san!" "Calm down," she said coldly. "There's no point in running around now." "Yeah? Is there a point in doing anything now?" But I still returned to the table. "Today is Sunday. What do you usually do on Sundays?" "Me? Nothing." She suddenly smiled, stood up, and started collecting the dishes. "Then you won't have to come up with anything." I was watching Kagome wash dishes and attempted to fully grasp the comedy of the situation. Only in the Kyosuke's manga does the protagonist get a girl out of the blue. Has nowhere to go, and they start living together. Her grandfather was the only thing that didn't fit into the otherwise perfect setup, but he could simply be playing a role I didn't understand yet. If I were to keeping manga logic, I would have to begin a fierce competition for my heart between Kagome, Himitsu, Catherine, and I guess Ellie, to bring the number of heroines to 4. Not that I found such a turn of events particularly enticing. Takes a lot to run a harem. I could barely handle my own life. In a way, living with Kagome was convenient at least. I wouldn't have to worry about cooking anymore. About cooking. On the other hand, I had to worry about explaining all this to Himitsu. "Nico-san!" I seem to have lost myself to daydreaming. "Nico-san, where's the dish soap?" "Soap? Dish soap." I slowly repeated as if trying to grasp the meaning of a difficult foreign word. "I don't have any. There's regular soap over there." "You don't? What do you mean you don't?" "Why would I?" I smiled simple-mindedly. "I see." Kagome frowned and turned to the sink. "Well, we aren't in a restaurant. There aren't many dishes. Normal soap is good enough. It still leaves fat on the plates." "Fine, got it. I'll buy some dish soap." I said, though, not a day gone and she was already giving me orders in my own house. "Then you should also buy new sponges. These aren't any good at all." She raised a sponge that seemed perfectly fine to me. "Anything else?" I asked in a demonstratively polite tone. "Yes, actually." Kagome started to reply but caught herself. Must be imposing where I shouldn't, though she didn't look too apologetic. It's not hard or anything. I kept playing the role of the generous host. I can still wash the dishes like this, of course. Forgive me, Nico-san. And then for whatever reason I felt guilty. I was gonna drop by a household store anyway. "Great to hear." She smiled and turned off the tap. And then the doorbell rang. I was sort of happy for it to have interrupted this uncomfortable conversation. Grandfather must be back already. Kagome brightened up and hurried to the hall. I stood up and followed her. "You have class?" "Alrighty, Mafia babe. I wish you luck. Have a fun, as far as classes go, class. I'll see you soon." But the person standing at the doorstep was... Ellie! "Hi." I greeted her. As Kagome managed to duck behind my back, at the last moment. Nick, good morning. Am I interrupting? She was visibly nervous. Interrupting? Well, I mumbled, but Ellie didn't let me finish. I came to ask you, I wanted to know, did you think about her offer? Her offer? She frowned. About playing bass for Z Feelsy. Ah, right. I said as if I'd just figured out the answer to the simplest equation, having spent multiple hours on it. Now wasn't the best time. Didn't have the determination to just refuse and kick Ellie out, even though it had already been decided I wouldn't be able to play in her band. You aren't alone? Ellie looked behind my back and saw Kagome, who had somehow managed to shrink and take even less space than usual. Silence went on for a while. I wondered if there was really anything that strange about Kagome being at my place on a Sunday morning. Maybe not, but I'm sure Ellie would react to it. Like something was completely outrageous. Oh boy. Easy now, calm down. What is she doing here? Ellie stepped in and I automatically moved aside. Yeah, you see? But Kagome didn't stay silent. Your so-called friends burned down my restaurant, and Nico-san generously offered to let me and my grandfather stay at his place. Do you have a problem with that? They're so angry, look at them. One's flustered, one's angry. Whew, what will happen? Offered? What? Ellie clearly hadn't been expecting that explanation. You heard me. That's ridiculous. I don't understand. Nick? Well, her restaurant did burn down, and I did offer to let them stay the night here because... I began to haltingly explain the situation, but Kagome interrupted me again. Nico-san, you don't need to explain yourself to her. I'm not explaining myself. Nick, is it true? I haven't seen it with my own eyes or anything. Oh, is that so? And you're just taking her word for it? Would you like to take a look at the ashes? Go ahead. I'm sure you know the address. It was hard to even suspect Kagome was lying. The easiest thing to falsify is something that can't be verified. You can claim the pyramids were built by aliens or that you've seen a UFO. In the end, people would take you for an idiot but not an outright liar. It would be much more difficult to prove, for example, that the Americans never landed on the moon. Ho ho. As for Kagome's restaurant, you didn't even need to go to the moon to find out. Even if it's true, what do my friends have to do with that? Who else could have done it? Right after? She suddenly went silent. Don't judge other people by your standards. Just because you allow yourself violence doesn't mean others do. Besides, nobody in their right mind would respond to a slap with arson. There was logic in her words. Of course, Kawashima and Asakura were delinquents, but they weren't criminals. And would it be too much even for criminals, considering how dense the neighborhood was, and its dilapidated state? No district could have burned down. If you thought about it, it was more like something a maniac would do. I don't believe in coincidences. Who else would do that? What do I care? Let the police sort it out. The police? Kagome smirked and immediately shouted, Your grandfather has them all on his payroll. It's strange that he didn't just kill us all right away. Would have been a lot less hassle. Nick, how could you let this crazy brr into your house? Maybe she burned her own restaurant down. Kagome looked like a steam engine ready to overheat and explode. Girls, calm down already, I mumbled weakly. It was clear that both of them were so convinced that they were right. It was completely pointless to try and change their minds here and now. Felt like the referee of a boxing match, pointlessly shouting, Break! I just had to prevent the argument from turning into a real fight. And yet you're protecting her. Nick, I have never expected that of you. Nico-san just understands who your friends really are. Right, Nico-san? Last thing I wanted was to play the role of some sort of trophy that either party was ready to slit the other's throat for. Alright, I need a drink of water. Bless me. Excuse me. Girls, I suggest you don't jump to any conclusions. Everything's clear enough as it is. Who else would do that? You need to be arrested for defamation. That would be nice. Maybe then I could at least hope that there would be an investigation. Kagome seemed to be genuinely convinced that Kawashima and Asakura were the ones who set her restaurant on fire. Nick, I never expected this of you. But Ellie ignored her words. You're really Want to look like an innocent princess, don't you? Why the hell did you even show up here? What, do you not have enough other men running circles around you? You don't by the looks of it. You could have gone to a hotel. I couldn't, Kagome snapped. Naturally, she didn't want to tell Ellie about the money. Then to a friend's place. Oh wait, you don't have any. Then to your relatives. You have those, right? Ellie was gloating, and it looked quite ugly from the side. It's none of your business. I came to Nico-san because... She didn't know how to respond to Ellie's snide remarks, and the strain was just making her more and more red in the face. I realized this couldn't go on for much longer, or they could start an actual catfight. But after all that, I could no longer take Ellie's side. It would mean immediately kicking out Kagome and her grandfather. Ah, so Nick doesn't know yet. It's none of your business, Kagome shouted. Ellie, I think you'd better go. Sorry. I finally stepped in before it was too late. You have a big heart, Nick. She grinned and walked outside. I'll call you. Don't bother. Ellie responded and left the yard. Oh, that was how my music career ended before it even started. Yay! Well, what was that? I turned to Kagome. I should be asking you that. Me? You could have kicked her out earlier. Kagome snorted and went to the kitchen. Everything was over before I even knew what happened. God, Ellie just had to go and show up this early in the morning. It wasn't even Monday. I sighed, closed the door, and reluctantly followed Kagome, realizing that the conversation wasn't over yet. The dishes were dry, the smell of a healthy and nutritious breakfast had dissolved into the air, and my kitchen had become a much less cozy place once again. Kagome sat behind the table and nervously drummed her fingers against it. You could have at least let me talk to her one-on-one. Slowly walked back and forth and stopped across from Kagome. She looked like she was waiting in line for an unpleasant procedure at a hospital. Is that Angel Oven Chat? Hello! How you doing today? It's good to see ya. How's life treating ya? Kagome remained silent and absent-mindedly stared off into the distance. It's not like Ellie's done anything to you. She hasn't, Nico-san. Do you really believe that? She smirked spitefully. What, you think Kobayashi-jun's granddaughter would spend her nights setting fire to people's houses? You're in school, I know. Mafia Babe is in school too. She was here a second ago. How's your school day going so far? Good? I agree that you have every reason to suspect Kawashima and Asakura, but it's not like Ellie handed them the gasoline. Kagome bit her lip as she almost said something highly uncivilized. She's guilty in any case. Well, aren't you just the embodiment of Marx and Engels all in one, the fearless classic warrior? I said sarcastically, but my new tenant wasn't in the mood to laugh. Why do you hate Ellie so much? What am I supposed to love her for? It's been okay. That's good. By the way, Kagome's restaurant, it burned down. She thinks that someone burned it down, so that's not good. You weren't supposed to love her, but... I sighed and went silent, wondering whether this was worth talking about after all. I know, it's not good. I'm keeping her and her grandfather up for now, so that's good. Sometimes you're outright obsessed with her. She could have prevented all this. I did not want to agree with her, but Kagome was partially right. Ellie had promised to talk to them, and even did, if I could take her word. On the other hand, she couldn't and shouldn't be held responsible for the actions of others. After all, they weren't a gang or something. I remembered my run-in with them at the bar and, for a moment, wondered about the true nature of that group. On the other hand, just yesterday, I thought that Kawashima and Asakura would need some time to digest that slap from Kagome. It would have been smart to get their revenge immediately. They'd be prime suspects. At least I had thought so, and then things turned out the way they did. If I had been more far-sighted, I could be enjoying the quiet of a Sunday morning, instead of having a meaningless conversation with Kagome. It's a little too late to confront her now, don't you think? It always starts small. That in a decade she'll be destroying the lives of thousands of families. You're exaggerating. Are you sure about that, Nico-san? My forecasts weren't always accurate. You wouldn't need to search long to find plenty of examples, but I couldn't imagine Ellie in charge of an empire of evil. And she probably shouldn't give up on her music. What? I'm saying Ellie shouldn't give up on playing music, just like her shouldn't have given up on painting. You're going to keep making jokes, Nico-san. I suddenly noticed that Kagome had started calling me by my first name way more often than before. It felt nice, but at the same time, some unclear sense of alarm crept up deep inside me, vague and shapeless like smoke in a dark room. Yeah, joking around and stuff, such as a clown's somber fate. I'm glad you're having fun. Someone gave you some sweetbread? Aw, lucky. Who? Anyone you know, or a complete stranger person? Maybe someone that likes you or something? Maybe someone that is liking the stream and wants to give you the sweetbread to give to me? No, maybe not. Maybe that last one is no. Someone you know. That's nice of him. Whoever it was, you should give him a big thanky. Hee hee. In reality, of course I wasn't. I just don't think we should escalate an already complicated situation and start fights with everyone we come across. With everyone, or with Kobayashi in particular. Kagome was staring at me like we were playing Mafia. Mafia? What? You think them? Good. Eat it well. What are you implying? Her look made me feel uncomfortable. You seem to care a lot about her. You just can't imagine that somebody could ever think something bad about the mistress. Well, never mind. I sighed, having realized how pointless it would be to continue the conversation. Kagome obviously wasn't a person easily convinced, and if she was sure about something, it was useless to even try. Somebody knocked on the door so silently and gently that I barely heard it. Now that must be Grandfather. She ran to the hall, but this time I was faster than her. Even though there actually wasn't anyone to expect but her grandfather. Except that it was Kyosuke who had picked the least appropriate moment to show up. Having opened the door, I froze in the doorway, looking at him, then turned to Kagome, then back to him. Nick, I didn't know you had guests, he said, embarrassed. Yeah, Iwamura's son dropped by too. So I had to start making more excuses, but then Kagome's grandfather appeared in the yard, and having apparently not noticed Kyosuke, tottered to the porch. Nico-kun, you have got a visitor, then I won't bother you. He slowly walked past me, took off his shoes, and headed to the kitchen. The silent scene lasted for some while. Fine. I sighed as if I managed to find my way out of a very stuffy building. Just so happened that Iwamura's home burned down. I'm letting her and her grandfather stay at my place for a couple days until, well, that's the story. Ah, I see. He drawled and smiled. Just don't tell anyone. This is an emergency situation. What is this music? I'm hearing cowbells. I understand perfectly, Nick. His smile grew even wider. Mum's the word. I glanced at Kagome again. She was standing with her lips pursed and arms crossed. Then I won't bother the two of you. See you tomorrow at school. Iwamura-san. He bowed politely and took his leave. Well, ain't that just perfect? What's wrong? Are you embarrassed the others at school will find out about my circumstances? If Kyosuke knows, you may as well think the entire school does, too. So you are embarrassed? She smirked. Whatever. Makes no sense to talk about it now. I loudly slammed the door shut and returned to the kitchen. The old man was standing in the middle of the room, looking around as if in search of something. Kagome immediately jumped at him with questions. Well, what did you learn? Her grandfather slowly walked to the table and sat on a chair, his joints cracking and vertebrae scrunching. It seemed like he was about to fall apart like a wooden doll. You were playing a game and you played it till 1 a.m. Oh my gosh. You crazy kids and your games. Then again, what was I doing? What game were you playing, by the way? The policeman said that they're working on the case and looking for the culprits. Any details? They told me they will inform us if there was any news. Inform us? Inform how? Did you tell them that we're living at Nico-san's place now? The old man looked at her, puzzled. Dark nights. Ooh. I hope it's good. Hope you're having a fun time with that one. Oh, Kagome-chan, sorry, I forgot. I see. It was strange, but Kagome reacted pretty calmly. Let me just go there again, and... No need, I'll go myself. You go rest. The old man exhaled heavily, but more out of powerlessness than disappointment. It's good to be young. Then he left to my parents' room where I'd placed their futons. See, like I told you, the police aren't going to investigate anything. You love it so much already. That's a good sign, huh? That you love the game. And you're not just being forced to play it. Well, wait a bit. It's only been a day. If the perpetrator isn't found hot on the trail, it gets much harder to track them down later. Speaking from personal experience, statistics. There are 3 types of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. Did you come up with that yourself? No, Mark Twain did. Who? It was strange that Kagome intended to make it into Todai, but didn't know such a famous writer. In a way, it said even more about her than her attitude toward Ellie. The guy who wrote the books about Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Ah, she drawled without much interest, like I was talking about an orbital inclination of Jupiter in relation to the plane of the ecliptic. And how will this Mark Twain of yours help us find the arsonists? Was just an example, a metaphorical one. If philosophy helped solve cases, they teach it in police academics. Aren't you pragmatic? Is that a compliment? Kagome suddenly smiled. So you're going to search for the arsonist yourself? I already know who did it. I just need to prove their guilt. Are you sure that... Wanted to say that if it was really Kawashima, Asakura, and their posse, they'd already burned one restaurant. And could well not stop there. But then I imagine the faces of the not particularly bright Asakura and the cunning, but also not too intelligent Kawashima. I didn't look like criminals any more than Ellie resembled an evil empress. Alright, I've got to go to the police. I'll figure out what's going on myself. I suddenly felt that I had to go with her. Of course, Kagome didn't ask me to, but I'd already been forced to be a part of her life, if only so long as to plan to stay at my place, and however unwillingly. Do you want me to go with you? If you want to. She shrugged calmly, walked into the hallway. This was unexpected answer. Froze for a few seconds, then ran after her. Kagome had put her shoes on and left the yard. Hello, Eliza! What's up? Good to see you today. Welcome back to the love, money, rock and roll game. How's life treating you today? The weather was good today. The Sunday morning looked very appealing for a walk. When I finally caught up with Kagome, she started walking a bit slower. Are you sure going to the police is a good idea? I'm doing good too. Just another day of reading this game and getting further and further to the ending. The end. Kagome's restaurant burned down, by the way, Eliza. Just to let you know. I do have to tell them how to reach us, in case if they find something. Didn't you just tell me 5 minutes ago that the police won't even bother investigating your case? You're fine, Eliza, don't worry. Oh, I need another drink again. I am parched this morning. I'm as parched as a parched creature in a desert that's parched. I did, but I at least want to do everything I can. Sure, it was necessary to give the police at least some contact information. After all, we couldn't exclude the possibility of an accident or that the arson had been performed by someone outside of Kawashima's group. I'm not staying hydrated. No, don't think I am. I gotta be hydrated even more. Wish you'd use all this energy you have for something peaceful. What are you implying? Well, you did say you kicked Kawashima and Asakura out when they came to your restaurant. What, was I supposed to offer them tea and cake? She smirked instead of getting indignant. No, I don't mean that. For starters, you shouldn't have picked a fight. What, Nico-san is standing up for myself not feminine enough? What does that have to do? She grinned so triumphantly that I suddenly felt guilty, as if I had actually said something utterly ridiculous. You're so easy dig at, Nico-san. Kagome laughed. Look who's talking. I grumbled. All my interest in continuing this conversation evaporated. Kagome and I visited to the police station. The officers there indeed didn't seem too interested in their job. Not that I had ever had to deal with the police before, so I had nothing to compare them to. The officer on duty reluctantly wrote down my address and telephone number, unsubtly hinting that we were distracting him from something much more important, even though he was flipping through some magazine when he came in. Kagome looked upset and irritated when we walked out onto the street. See? Just like I told you. Maybe their detectives are more energetic, I said unsurely. If they were at all like that fat guy at the reception desk, there wasn't much hope to hope for. Since we're here, let's take a look at... I hesitated. What's left of my restaurant? Do you not believe me, Nico-san? You think I made everything up? Christ, I never said anything like that. You didn't, but you thought it. Oh, come on. Relax, I'm joking. She suddenly smiled. Let's go. I want to take another look anyway. Maybe something survived the fire. Kagomi's restaurant, or what was left of it, more like, was a sad sight. It seemed like the old wood had gone up like a match, burning down almost instantly. Thank God Kagome and her grandfather managed to escape. In place of the restaurant, there was only a pile of charred wood and kitchen equipment. Here and there were shining plates, cups, spoons, and other dishes, washed by the water from the nozzle. In the middle of it all stood an almost untouched chair, somehow having survived the inferno. Next to it was a pan filled with charred pieces of wood that looked like burnt toast. Ravens were circling in the sky above us, apparently looking for something to scavenge. The fire hadn't spared anything valuable, of course. Kagome carefully walked over to what was left of the gifts of the sea, while I tactfully waited for her on the sideline. How does it feel to lose everything you had in an instant? I'd lost my parents, but kept the house. As it turned out, the bank account. Obviously, nothing can replace a person you love, but it's always easier to grieve in a Mercedes than digging through the ruins of your home. Once Kagome was done surveying, we returned to the station. Let's go home, she said. I noted that it was actually my home, but keeping her condition in mind, kept close to quiet. I chose to keep quiet. On the way back, Kagome looked like she'd just escaped hell herself. Maybe we shouldn't have gone after all. I asked her carefully. She didn't respond immediately. We should have. Now I'm certain what I must avenge and who should pay. Avenge? I said with surprise. How exactly are you going to kill them, or what? You're alone, and there's plenty of them. She stubbornly remained silent, which I could tell took a considerable effort for her. Yes, she's distracting. No more homesick for Eliza's. You're planning to do something illegal, I need to know. It's none of your business. She finally hissed through her teeth. It wouldn't be if you hadn't decided to stay in my house. Kagome bit her lip and stopped. I don't know what to do, but... Her cheeks started trembling, and tears swelled in her eyes. I just can't forgive them for this. How am I supposed to move on, knowing those bastards are sneering at me, enjoying their freedom? Nico-san, do you know that people from the entire neighborhood came to our restaurant? For example, Kawasaki-san. He's more than 90 years old and has 12 grandchildren, and even more great-grandchildren. Suzuki-san goes out to the sea in a trawler and always comes by our place for a drink every time he returns to shore. Honda-san often played Go with my grandfather. It's a strategy board game. It's old. There was an anime series about it. Alright, enough, I understand. Those people and dozens others are victims too. Not saying those responsible should face an appropriate punishment, but you are a police officer or a detective. But I have to. She burst into tears right in the middle of the street. The fish merchants gave me disapproving looks. I had no other choice but to hug her and try to calm her down. Kagome didn't push me away, but I didn't press herself closer either, just standing and crying as if she was leaning against a wall. There. Finally, Kagome calmed down somewhat, wiped her tears with a handkerchief, and looked at me. Sorry, Nico-san, for making a scene. That wasn't like me. And thank you for letting us stay at your place. No problem, I understand. Kagome was speaking forcefully, clearly trying to sound genuine, which made me feel embarrassed. Nico-san, I don't always express my emotions properly, and I might seem rude, I know, but my grandfather and I really are grateful. Alright, I just acted like a decent person. Anyone would do the same in my place. Kagome looked at me enigmatically and shrugged. We barely talked on the way back. Apparently she said everything she wanted, and I felt an ambiguous awkwardness that made me not want to strike up a conversation. But Kagome did drag me to a store and bought a number of simple groceries for lunch, and even paid with her own money. When I said that it was the last of her money, she just scoffed. The old man was waiting for us at home, thunderously snoring at the kotatsu. The sight made me a little embarrassed, but Kagome seemed to pay zero attention to him. Alright, guess it's time to have lunch. She looked at the clock with a shade of doubt. Are you asking me? Yes, who else? Well, sure. I agreed carefully. Kagome was cooking lunch with something akin to frenzy. Meanwhile, I couldn't decide whether to stay in the kitchen or go to my room. Whoa, why's the music intense? I couldn't turn on the TV because of her sleeping grandfather, but I noticed our return. Since there was no other alternatives, it was a great time to think. If Kawashima and Asakura really were to blame, the action seemed extremely illogical. First threatening Kagome and then later that night burning down a restaurant? Sure, maybe they'd simply grown extremely cocky and had even gone berserk from impunity, but Kawashima at least didn't look like a complete idiot. I didn't know who their parents were, but arson is no petty crime. It's easy to lose control over yourself when you're never punished for throwing around insults or humiliating people or getting into small fights. But it's not like every school hoodlum ends up a real criminal. Besides, all of them had something to lose. Money, status, reputation. Was revenge for a slap enough to put all that at risk? I couldn't even imagine Kawashima going so far as asking her friends to Kagome, but not burning her restaurant at night with people sleeping inside. The risk of their being victims seemed unjustifiably high. Who was the culprit then? Maybe the police would manage to establish whether it was arson or an accidental fire. I didn't know how Gifts of the Sea had been doing financially, but it was obvious that even if they had issues, their creditors weren't going to destroy their debtors' only source of income. Competitors? Judging by what Kagome had told me about their regulars, I could quite confidently assume they mostly served the same people year after year, and the customer base didn't do much change. In general, the restaurant looked like an establishment that had been barely making ends meet, so it seemed that no one had an obvious motive to burn the place. Nobody, except for Kawashima and Asakura, but yet it would have been an unreasonable response to a simple slap. Damn. I sighed and changed position. My legs had fallen asleep. What are you sighing for? I'm almost done. Kagome replied, displeased. No, it's not because of that. Because of what then? I cast a quick glance at her grandfather, but he kept snoring. I was just thinking that arson was a bit too much for high school students. Who isn't it too much for? She put a knife down and turned to me. Kawashima didn't seem like a total idiot to me, and she's next to their group hierarchy, after Ellie. So? Well, think about it. They came to your place in the afternoon to talk things over, then burn it down the same night. Who would be the prime suspects then? You're speaking from the position of a person who is afraid of the consequences of his actions. Kawashima might not even think she'd have to bear responsibility for them. Money doesn't automatically make you an idiot. Kagome didn't respond and kept cooking. Do you disagree? I just know it's them. That's it? You just know? I don't want to play their lawyer, but presumption of innocence is still a thing. You need to prove their guilt, not the other way around. Of course, if they left something at the crime scene, like a gas can with their fingerprints. Suddenly realized that I was pretty much talking to myself. Kagome had long stopped listening to me. The awkward silence was broken by her grandfather, woken up by the delicious smells. Kagome-chan, is it lunchtime already? The old man stood up with such an effort that I worried he might break a bone. I wanted to cook something for you, but dozed off. He walked to the table and sat next to me. How are things with the police? They're great. Lunch turned out to be no worse than breakfast. Kagome was an excellent cook. And unlike Himitsu, she handled basic and complicated dishes equally well. Himitsu could impress me with borscht, but her basic dishes were often a bit plain. Thank you. Enjoy. It's the least I can do. Kagome was about to take the dishes away to wash them, but I stopped her. No way. This time I'll wash them myself. She just smiled in response. I opened the tap, partially listening to her conversation with the old man. Honda-san, we were going to play today. For God's sake, it's like Go is the most important thing in your life. Kagome-chan, but I'm sure when Honda-san sees the restaurant in ashes, he'll figure out if the game is cancelled. The old man didn't reply immediately. Gifts of the Sea was my life's work. I know you didn't spend much time in the restaurant, but I'd hoped you would inherit it. Since Shinji went into science, you could marry Nico-san and take him into the family. Grandfather! Kagome exclaimed, and I could hear both anger and embarrassment in her voice. Anyway, I have to go now. Where to? I turned around. Got something to do. What happened to the restaurant is, of course, a tragedy for us. But no one died, and life goes on. I didn't know what to say to that. We were roommates now, but that didn't give me the right to poke my nose into her life. Listen to Nico-san, grandfather. I know, right, Angel Babe? Or Angel Love? Oh my gosh. I'm kind of tired at the moment. My eyelids are kind of, doing the old droopy thing. But so help me, we're gonna get through this, guys. The rest of the day passed without any incidents. I talked with the old man about this and that, watched the TV, read a book for quite a while, made dinner, and finally I couldn't hold back any more. Do you know where Kagome went off to? I don't. He drawled as if he hadn't understood the question. Does she often disappear like this until late at night? Nico-kun, you have to understand that it hasn't been easy for Kagome-chan since her mother died. We didn't talk much when Yuno-san was alive. She and Shinji didn't last long. He sighed and stared out into the moonlit lit yard with his old cloudy eyes. Divorce. In my youth, nobody would have ever thought of that. Kagome's past was clearly full of secrets, and I wanted to learn more about it. But just when I was about to start asking questions, the doorbell rang. Kagome was back. I opened the door, she greeted me politely and came in, holding a bag in her hands. Is that what you call dinner? Kagome walked to the stove and lifted a pan in which I left some gyoza for her. Gyoza? Oh, darn it. Is there at least meat inside? Implying that the dumplings were store-bought. Well, we didn't know when you'd be back, I said evasively. I see. I'm tired and I want to go to sleep. Okay, good night. Wasn't that late, but only by my standards. A lot of Japanese were indeed asleep by now. I'll go too, Nico-kun. Good night to you too, Moriyuki-san. I was soon left alone, and my kitchen, for the first time in a while, appeared lifeless and empty, like someone had taken all the furniture and utensils out of it. I hadn't felt lonely there in quite a while. Maybe it was about Himitsu, who had created a homely atmosphere. Maybe about the memories of my dead parents that would still sometimes come to me. And now with pretty much strangers were sleeping in their room, I began to realize how big the house was for just one tenant. The sleep wouldn't come, and I long kept tossing and turning on the bed with a book in hand until I finally passed out. All the interrogations and investigations into Kagome's past could wait for tomorrow. The next day. Monday is always a difficult day. One of the first thoughts I had in the morning was about how long it'd take for Kyosuke to spread the word that he'd met Kagome at my place. And if only that was the only problem. Kyosuke seeing her grandfather meant the story would be painted in a totally different colors by his telling. Completely Lovecraftian colors that had nothing to do with reality. Kyosuke's story spreading was scarier than the chance that the actual truth might come out. Breakfast was already ready when I entered the kitchen, which buoyed my spirits somewhat. Good morning. Kagome sat on the table with her grandfather by her side. Another chair sat across from them. Against my will, the setup was leaving me the hot seat, like the accused in a courtroom. Good morning, Nico-kun. Did you sleep well? Pretty well, thank you. What about you? It's not easy to fall asleep in a new place. Old people generally don't sleep well. He smiled, and his expression was so full of humility that it made me feel a bit uncomfortable. He was supposed to be about the same age as Kobayashi Jun, although I only had a very vague idea on how to tell the ages of people way older than me. Still, the head of Kobayashi Corporation both looked and acted with much more confidence. No offense to Moriyuki-san, but you could say that his life was at his nadir, while Kobayashi Jun gave the impression of a brisk old man so full of energy. What about you? Slept well? Asked Kagome somewhat ironically. Well enough. She was drinking coffee, and the smell of it bringing back memories that seemed like they didn't belong to me. The instructive tone of my mother and the detached expression of my father's face. The monotonous hum of the television and the noise of the vacuum cleaner. When did I last use a vacuum cleaner? Casting these thoughts away, I focused on the food. Thank you, everything was delicious. You are welcome. Kagome replied coldly. Now we need to go to school. Only then did I notice she was wearing her uniform. I say you save what's most important from the fire. What do you mean? The uniform? Of course not. I bought a new one yesterday. Ah, that's where you went. What do you think? Didn't think a thing. I snapped back and stood up. We walked out of the house together, but I stopped at the gate. Maybe it'd be better if we go to school separately. What, are you afraid we'll be seen together? Hey, Geek and Rat. What's up? How you doing today? Welcome to another day of this game. How's life treating ya? I'm not, but I sighed and closed my eyes for a while, as if hoping that the cruel outside world would turn into something else. Kyosuke must have told everyone already, so there may be all kinds of unbelievable rumors going around about us at school. For example, of course Kyosuke had a much more vivid imagination than I did. That you're pregnant, that your grandfather here is here to supervise our engagement. Kagome blushed, but then giggled. If only your Kyosuke knew my grandfather. He's the one who has to be supervised, but he doesn't, and what Kyosuke doesn't know he tends to make up. Even if that's the case, I'm not too scared. Good for you. Truth be told, I had zero interest in catching weird looks and becoming the subject of gossip. I had much more important things to deal with, and I need the extra attention. So do we have a deal? Kagome looked at me seriously. Nico-san, I understand what you mean, but I'm not going to toe the line. Hide or let them control my life. Do you understand the concept of a reasonable compromise? We aren't towing the lines. We're just trying to not make the situation any worse. It's not like you can explain to every single person what's going on, right? But yeah, how you doing today, Geek and Rat? Is all well? You doing good? Or I don't know. Give a speech in front of the entire school from a podium like the principal would. Common sense, understand? Kagome was looking at me, her eyebrows slowly but steadily drawing together. If you don't want to go to school with me, you don't have to. You don't have to go to school at all. What do I care? She turned around and abruptly walked away. Well, I managed to get what I wanted in the end, but I would have to do a little more peacefully. After 5 minutes, I decided Kagome was far enough ahead of me. It was quiet in Himitsu's house. I wondered how she reacted when she found out I had another girl living with me. Walked to school slower than usual, changed my shoes, went up to the second floor. It seemed that nobody was looking at me with particular attention, but everything changed as soon as I entered the classroom. Kagome was sitting behind her desk looking out the window, but it was like someone had set up an invisible wall separating my new roommate from the rest of the class. The guys reacted like they'd seen someone from the opposite opposing team in their locker room, while the girls started whispering frantically. I walked to my desk and gave Kyosuke a sullen look. He was pretending to not notice me. Actually, I wasn't too angry at him. It was stupid to be angry with a nightingale for singing. That's just how the bird is. I was more annoyed by the need to put on an act. Pretend. So I was living with the girl. So what? What's the big deal? And why was everyone so interested in other people's lives? I couldn't have understood, but they weren't even my friends. Except maybe for... Michael, approach me. Hi, Nick. I don't want to start this conversation, but it's better if you hear it from me. I'm listening. Prepared myself to learn what Kyosuke's creative genius had produced. People are saying you impregnated Iwamura-san, got her kicked out of her house, and now she's living with her. Maybe I should have underestimated my imagination after all. It was almost the story I had told Kagome a half-hour ago. Kyosuke? Asked in a dull voice. He didn't reply, he just looked at me sympathetically. Kyosuke? I repeated. I don't know for sure. He swears he has nothing to do with it. In any case, Nick, you should know I don't believe it. He sounded like Gollum trying to persuade Frodo and Sam they can trust him. Just tell me, how did you find out about it? The entire class knows. I see. I grit my teeth and clenched my fists. I don't think it was Kyosuke, at least not deliberately. Thanks, I heard you. There were only several minutes left before class, not enough to have a serious conversation with Kyosuke. Somehow, my initial goodwill toward him had disappeared without a trace. Maybe it was because the school would eventually find out about Kagome's new living condition. And even if not, I wouldn't feel guilty about that. But they'd only learned what the bare truth was, not wrapped in Kyosuke's bountiful imagination. I knew he could have spiced it up a little, sure, but this was beyond the pale. I barely managed to wait until the end of our first class. The entire time Kyosuke tried so desperately not to look in my direction that he probably deserved an award just for effort. Finally, the bell rang and I dashed to his desk. Let's go and talk, my dear friend. I grabbed Kyosuke by the back of his jacket and dragged him to the hallway. Hey, you little bastard, what are these rumors that are spreading right now? What the hell is going on now? Alright, let's keep going. It wasn't me. He immediately started offering excuses. Good that you know. It'll save us some time. I swear, I haven't told anyone that you and Iwamura-san... Well, I mean, what, me and Iwamura-san? I don't know, Nick. I saw you together, but that doesn't mean that you... That we what? Her house burned down, and you just offered to help. A roof over her head, so to say. Anyone in your place would. Kyosuke tried to make excuses, but it was clear to see what he really thought about the whole situation. Hey, Shion. No scramble. That's at nighttime. This is the morning streams. The morning streams are when I play PC games. And it just so happens to be this particular game called Love, Money, Rock and Roll. It's pretty good so far. Morning. How you doing today? It's good to see ya. How's life treating ya? Need coffee? Oh, you better get coffee then. I feel sleepy too. And then could I blame him? If Kagomi's restaurant had burned down a month ago, would I have let her live at my place while she and her grandfather tried to figure out what to do next? I had to at least be honest with myself. It wasn't likely. But Kyosuke didn't know about the events of last couple of weeks. Most people in his position would have come to the wrong conclusion. Look, I know this seems strange from outside. I'm letting a classmate I barely talked to before live at my house. Her grandfather, too. But she has her own circumstances, and so do I, and there's nothing between us. The last phrase felt like it had been said by someone else. And in any case, nobody gave you the right to gossip about it. Nick, I swear I haven't told anyone. Haven't told anyone probably means you've only told a couple friends and asked them to keep it a secret, right? Not telling anyone means telling nobody. And when would I have had the time? It hasn't even been a day. Rumors spread quickly. Nick, I'm serious. Kyosuke was speaking so confidently I even doubted myself for a moment. Could anyone else have found us? Seen us? I couldn't exclude the possibility, but it was hard to imagine any of my classmates spying on me on a Sunday. Okay, so who could it be then? You said it yourself, it hasn't been a day. Nick, I swear I don't know. Suddenly, his face brightened up. What about Himitsu-chan? Have you asked her? Himitsu, I said automatically, the name echoing disturbingly in my mind. Himitsu can keep her mouth shut, unlike some people. She hasn't even seen. Even if she had, she talked to me first. No, I couldn't imagine Himitsu spreading the rumor. Still, our relationship was far from perfect lately. Human perception is so strange. Never thought Himitsu was a bad person, but here I was ready to attribute her with something she'd never do. It's not Himitsu, and not me. He was sticking to his guns, and I had no idea what to do next. Kyosuke didn't have a particularly strong backbone, it's sure, but if he was sure about something, he wouldn't back down. But his visit yesterday and his encounter with Kagome and her grandfather, could it be just a coincidence? Alright. I guess we are doing Let It Go. But if it were for you, you would have told me, right? Of course, Nick. His expression was so genuine that I even felt ashamed for being suspicious of him. Then who could it be? I doubt there's someone watching my house 24/7, except probably for the KGB and Kobayashi Corporation. But I couldn't imagine organizations like that spreading rumors at my school. And the pregnancy. Added in a softer voice. It's not just someone saying that they saw Iwamura at my place. Maybe someone wanted to hurt you. Perhaps he was right. And if I thought about who I could consider my enemies... Just then Kagome appeared from around the corner, walking straight for us. There you are. She immediately jumped on Kyosuke. Mind telling me if I look pregnant? Kagome, wait. I tried to stand up for my friend as I wasn't so sure about his guilt anymore. Nico-san, I can handle this myself. She cut me off once again, showing her unwavering tenacity, capable of to tear down anything and everything on the way to her goal. So answer me, what the hell were you thinking? Kyosuke was a sorry sight. Iwamura-san, I already explained to Nick that it wasn't me. It was pure coincidence that we met at his place. I haven't told anyone a word about it, I swear. Just a coincidence, you say? How convenient. Iwamura-san, I don't believe in coincidences. God, what else am I supposed to do to get you two to believe me? He looked away from her and to me, looking for support. I really think that... But Kagome didn't even look at me. And you call yourself Nico-san's friend, ready to sell anyone for your 15 minutes of fame. Even if Kyosuke actually was at fault here, he hadn't done it out of malice. Wait, just hold your horses. And you, Nico-san, you're perfectly happy to let anyone walk all over you. No wonder you nursed such a snake on your chest. Kagome, enough, you're taking it too far. And you, know that I won't leave it like this. She kept attacking Kyosuke. Kagome was panting, but seemingly couldn't come up with a realistic enough threat. In the end, she scoffed, turned around, and all but ran in a different direction from her classroom. Nick, what did she mean? Kyosuke looked genuinely scared. She's going to ambush you after school and stab you in the back with a knife. On the other hand, if Kagome really is pregnant, she wouldn't risk the child. Then she'll send her grandfather after you instead. He's a black belt in karate. He'll be deceived by his feeble appearance. So you're joking, right? What do you think? I asked warily. Iwamura-san can be very persuasive when she wants to be. That she can. This words made my heart respond with a warm feeling, as if it was someone else close to me being praised. So she really won't do anything to me? I kept worrying. Calm down, she won't. I'll see to it. But we still don't know who's spreading these rumors and why. Someone must benefit from it. I returned to the thought that had been interrupted by Kagome's appearance. If I had to name the people in this school I could call my enemies, they'd be Asakura, Kawashima, and the rest of their gang. Asakura? She hasn't been at school this morning. That means nothing. I guess. I wanted to ask something else, but the bell rang. Asakura wasn't there by the second period either. Of course, in itself, that wasn't any more unusual than my constant truancy. She could have spread the rumor yesterday over the phone. I was sure she had enough connections at school to do so. But I couldn't just sit and do nothing. If it wasn't Asakura, then that must have been Kawashima. Naturally, I couldn't just run into their classroom and start accusing her, but I couldn't talk to Ellie. Or I could. I barely waited for the break and hurried to the old music room. Hoped Ellie didn't believe the rumors. Actually, even though yesterday's conversation hadn't ended well, I still managed to explain everything to her. It was quiet in the old wing. I hesitated at the classroom's door for a moment, but then got it together and pulled on the handle. There she is. Fortunately, Ellie hadn't changed her pattern and was there today too. She was just sitting behind the piano, looking out the window. Hello! I greeted her politely. Ah, Nick, I thought you wouldn't come. She replied phlegmatically. Sorry for yesterday. I gotta stretch. And then I stopped myself. Although, I have nothing to apologize for. I haven't done anything wrong. Yes, you're right. That sadness in her voice sounded unusual, but I still need to talk to you. Ellie, you probably already heard what they're saying about Iwamura and I. I have. Hopefully you don't believe it. Iwamura-san didn't look pregnant yesterday. She smiled, but it was like she was a defendant in court who, despite long fighting to overturn her conviction, finally realized how powerless she was to change it. Wanted to joke about Kagome's pregnancy being in its early stages, but changed my mind at the last moment. I'm glad, but I'd really like to know who's spreading these rumors. Ellie apparently took my question for a rhetorical one. That's why I wanted to ask you. Maybe Kawashima said something? You think it's Marie? She asked very calmly. I hadn't expected this reaction. Well, considering her relationship with Iwamura, let's be honest, I've also had some disagreements with her. I don't know, Nick. Everyone was talking about it, Marie as well. But I have no idea who started it. I see. I drawled, moved a bit closer to the piano, but suddenly felt like I was crossing an invisible line, and returned to the door. What are you so worried about? You and Iwamura-san loved each other. What do you care about other people's opinions? Love? I exclaimed. There's nothing between us. Things just turned out like this, that's all. Right, let a perfect stranger live with you. There's nothing to be ashamed of, Nick. I'm not ashamed of anything. But the thought that Kagome and I could be in a relationship actually made me uncomfortable. And the feeling was nothing like the one you'd have with being pushed to get together with the ugliest girl in class. If there was something between us, I would have told you. A light of hope seemed to glimmer in Ellie's eyes for a moment, but then it went out. I just couldn't say no to her. After everything that happened, her father went missing. Her house burned down. And it was also their only source of income. All their money went up in the fire, too. Yes, we have something in common, I won't deny that, but love, Ellie, you've got it all wrong. You're explaining yourself like I'm accusing you of a crime. Guess I really was trying too hard to justify myself. But to persuade someone else of something, you have to convince yourself of it first. Wasn't that exactly what I was doing? I have nothing more to say. I totally forgot that I had wanted to talk to her about Kawashima, but it seemed that Ellie knew nothing more than what she told me. I understand that you're no longer interested in playing bass. Right, about that. Naturally, I hadn't been thinking about that at all. It's just not the best time right now. I'll think about it whenever everything is sorted out. No need. No need for what? Music isn't something you should be forced to do. Yeah, but I felt like a lazy student, afraid of dropping out only because of his parents had spent a lot of money and effort to get him going into university. I understand, Nick. No worries. I'm not upset. Iwamura-san is more important to you now. Only then did I notice that Ellie was constantly calling Kagome Iwamura-san. She never referred to her so politely when talking alone with me before. Hang on. Okay. I'm telling you, I get it. She interrupted me, steely notes in her voice. Well, since she got it, what was the point in arguing? Well, fine. I really doubt that I can help you two with finding Iwamura-san's father, but feel free to turn to me if you need help. Ellie stood up and walked past me. I could see both sadness and determination on her face, like she'd made an important but very hard decision. Thank you, I said to no one when I left alone. Perhaps somewhere deep inside I could guess what Ellie felt. The same way you could sometimes guess that the next card will be an ace. Except that with the hand I had at the moment, an ace would be too much. I didn't even want to think about it. It seemed like our acquaintance would end here, and that would be better for everybody. She really couldn't help with finding Kagome's father, but she was capable, even if unintentionally, of making the situation worse. I looked at Asakura's empty desk. If they'd managed to get away with everything up to this point, spreading a rumor would barely warrant mentioning. That was for sure. Anyway, if Kagome and her grandfather left for Hokkaido, this incident would quickly be forgotten. Teenagers yearn for new experiences and have trouble with consistency. The thought that I'd never see Kagome again made me feel uncomfortable, as if I were losing a close friend, or, in the end, I wanted to get to the truth too, and learn the real reason for my parents' death. I was going to talk to Kagome during the next break, but her inescapable English teacher took her away. Immediately, Michael approached me. Nick, do you have plans after school? Not any I can think of. Is there something you wanted to do? Do you want to walk home together? I've got something to talk about. It should take 15 minutes or so. Okay. Okay. Once classes were over, we left school and casually headed for my house. Michael was quiet, as if he'd forgotten that he meant to have a conversation with me. Well, I'm all ears. Nick, have you found out who was spreading the rumors about you and Iwamura-san? No, I'm still on it. So you have suspects? Asakura, Kawashima, who else would be interested in doing this? Do you have any evidence? Even if I did, what of it? Whoops. Ha ha ha. Whoopsie. You can't put a person behind bars for being an asshole in Japan. But you don't think it's Kyosuke's fault anymore? I guess not. I don't know. The lard ass has a big mouth and all, but pregnancy? Well, when would we have time for that? Just yesterday I had no idea what Iwamura's first name was. But now you do. From anyone else I would have taken that as a taunt, while Michael's face bore its usual ambiguous expression of both concentration and thoughtful detachment. Do you also think there's something between us? Is that the case? No, it's not. I sighed, too weary to even get angry. The restaurant she lived in burned to the ground. She asked to stay at my place for a time. I agreed. That's it. I see. At least he wasn't going to interrogate me. And that's what you wanted to talk to me about? Not just that. I wanted to inform you that I've asked Catherine out. Inform. I smirked, but his information echoed with a dull pain somewhere inside. And did she say? She agreed. Well, you aren't going to get any congratulations from me, but let's say I'm happy for you. Nick, I just want you to know that you did your best to make it right. Sure, I get it. My blatant sarcasm rang in the air. I didn't mean anything like that. Sure thing. Michael's latest attempt to make himself seem like an honest friend didn't make me feel as wildly indignant as the last one. What's the point in berating a person when they don't understand what they're doing wrong? And was I really one judge wrong from right? Alright, I don't want to discuss Catherine. I'm just too preoccupied for that. You see what's going on around me, right? Michael stopped and offered his hand. Take care, Nick. You too, I responded hesitantly. And yet, this conversation woke up feelings I really could live without at the moment. I wondered how Catherine would react to the rumor that I had gotten Kagome pregnant. I hadn't looked at Katya once that entire day, and seemed to even forgotten she existed. Kagome occupied not only my house, but also my thoughts. She made her problems mine and forced me to look at things from new angles, including things that had seemed unshakable to me. Of course, it was clear that Catherine wouldn't believe such nonsense, but there's no smoke without fire. You wouldn't spread rumors if they weren't any substance to them at all. I really had been spending a lot of time with Kagome lately. That much would be hard not to notice. Or should I even worry about Catherine's opinion? It's not like I expected us to get together again, right? Things we no longer need are hard to throw away because we become too attached to them, and feel like we'd lose something important by throwing them into the garbage. We like to think they can still be used somehow, coming up with absurd uses for an old pen or a broken pair of scissors. The irony is we totally forgot their existence a minute or two after finally throwing them away. Of course I didn't want to compare my feelings for Catherine to an old pen, but in a sense the analogy was appropriate. Coming home, I found Kagome's grandfather in front of the TV. Sorry, Nico-kun, I couldn't find anything to do. I'm used to working at the restaurant during the day, but now... It's alright, I understand. I sounded annoyed despite myself. You're holding up just fine. Once you reach my age, you understand that all material things come and go. But I still feel sorry for the restaurant. Kagome still hadn't come back from school? I haven't seen her. The old man replied hesitantly. He had it good. Wouldn't have noticed even if war broke out. As it often happens at this time of the day, hunger occupied all my thoughts. Moriyuki-san, would you like to have lunch? I don't think Kagome will be upset if we eat without her. Of course, Nico-kun, of course. He livened up, stood up with some effort, and walked to the fridge. The old man cooked well, but his dishes missed something special. His rice tasted somehow dusty, or maybe the smell of senility confused my olfactory receptors. The restaurant wouldn't have lasted long with a chef like this. That made me respect Kagome and her contribution to the family business even more. Moriyuki-san was eating slowly and looked like a meditating Buddhist monk. Didn't want to interrupt his thoughts, but also couldn't bear to remain silent. Kagome must be having been helping a lot at the restaurant, right? Oh yes, Kagome-chan takes every job very seriously. When she only was just starting living with us 3 years ago, Kagome-chan couldn't cook at all. Can you believe it? Barely, to be honest. Cooking didn't seem to me like some sort of forbidden art that would take a lifetime to master. But coming so far in such a short amount of time, that I was worthy of respect. After all, Himitu had been cooking for as long as I knew her. She would spend many hours in the kitchen in the evenings, after work, and in the early morning until she learned. That sounds like her. I realized that she never wanted to spend her entire life over a stove or serving food to tipsy fishermen. But her mother, son, left us too early. What happened to her? His eyes became cloudy, and the old man stared at his plate as if forgetting my presence. Moriyuki-san? Kagome-chan would tell you herself when the time comes. That when the time comes sounded pretty menacing, but I couldn't just keep prying, right? Thank you, Moriyuki-san. It was delicious. I'll wash the dishes. Thank you, Nico-kun, for everything. The old man got back to his TV while I went to my room and grabbed a random book from the shelf. It was Golding's novel, The Spire. I didn't even remember where I'd gotten the book from. I've read Lord of the Flies once, but didn't get much out of it beyond the message that leaving teenagers without any supervision wasn't a good idea. People unrestrained by an external force, be it law, religion, or morals, sooner or later degrade to a primal form. To what extent were Kawashima and Asakura similar with the protagonist of Lord of the Flies? Unlike Ellie, I doubted anyone expected anything great from them. Consequently, there was no pressure from above, and their wealth removed any pressure from below. Of course, their parents might have provided a moral compass instead, but judging by the girl's behavior, they had failed at that. Maybe Kawashima and Asakura would get their wits about them when they entered adult life, or maybe as they got older, the societal norms from which they would no longer be able to escape could clamp down on their primal instincts. But for the time being, we were all shipwrecked together on the same island, a school for rich kids. And I felt as if they were worshipping a pig's head on a stake, expecting to get pleasure in return, but more importantly, reassurance and security. Night. Evening came, but Kagome still hadn't returned. I began to worry and was pacing from one room to another. Meanwhile, Moriyuki-san was peacefully sleeping in front of the working TV and didn't seem to be concerned at all about his granddaughter. After it had long gotten dark outside, I made a simple dinner and invited the old man to join me. When you sleep like this all day, it's hard to fall asleep at night. Moriyuki-san, do you know where Kagome is? Is it normal for her to be missing like this the whole day? I don't know, Nico-kun. Kagome-chan is a big girl already, and I'm too old to be watching her when Shinji was with us. Right. I hope he'll be found. You know, when Shinji was about your age, I was so happy that he enjoyed studying and that he was planning to go into science. But in the end, was it worth it? I always knew Kagome-chan wouldn't want to run the restaurant after my death either. And the whole thing was a nothing but trouble. I couldn't just drop it, of course. But why would the young ones need it? And now there's no restaurant anymore. I remained silent, and Moriyuki-san didn't seem to expect any sympathy. He simply ate in silence. If I knew where to find Kagome, that's what I would be doing right now. But why would I be worried about her absence in the first place? I already let them stay at my place, and now I was going to allow Kagome to rule my life? Somebody knocked on the door loudly. There she was. I dashed to the entrance so quickly that I've been waiting for this the whole day. Where have you been? We were worried. Kagome was standing on the porch and she looked tired. Who's we? I was, and Moriyuki-san. I'm sure grandfather didn't even notice I was there. To some extent, she was correct. So will you let me in? I stepped aside, allowing her to pass. Kagome-chan, the old man had begun to fall asleep again. Since you're home, I'm going to sleep. Good night. He stood up slowly, his joints cracking like he was about to come apart, and slowly dragged himself to the room he shared with Kagome. You know, we have a saying, don't bring your rules to a stranger's house. While you live here, please be so kind as to tell me when you'll be back. It's just natural, after all. You don't even have the keys. My granddad is home. Kagome replied angrily and walked to the stove, where the leftovers from dinner were waiting for her in a pot. I see you weren't starving. It's not my stomach you should be worried about. Nico-san, stop being hysterical. I was looking for my father. Fine, but you could have warned me. I guess I could. Kagome sighed and put the lid back over the pot. But didn't think that was necessary. I saw you leaving school with that American. Michael. His name is Michael. Whatever. She was cold and even hostile. Maybe something happened while she was looking for her father, but I'd gotten too fired up that I couldn't stop. Listen, if there's something you aren't happy about, nothing's keeping you here. We'll be leaving soon, she said very calmly. And for now, I'm sorry, but I'm very tired and going to sleep too. So what happened? What do you mean? Well, you were looking for your father. Did you find anything? Nothing is something too. Kagome was looking at me attentively, not moving from her place. I seem to remember something of asking for my help just recently. The events of the last few days had pushed the fact of her father's disappearance somewhere on the back burner. There was the case for me, but what about Kagome? Yes, sorry, I should have to warn you. Her mood suddenly softened. I tried to find Nishimura-san, but to no avail. I'd imagine so. He turned pale as soon as he saw the papers. By the way, the papers. Only now did I remember the documents that had gotten Ichinose taken by the KGB. Kagome didn't reply, just lowered her head. I see. You should have left them at my place, I almost said. The overall situation seemed to be grim. Kagome can stand alone against the might of the corporation. Does she realize that? Nico-san, can I go to sleep? Of course, I'm not holding you. In reality, I wanted to ask her about a lot more, but the right questions refused to come to mind. Good night, then. Good night. Kagome hesitated. Nico-san, what do you want for breakfast? Maybe it's not obvious, but I'm grateful for what you're doing for us. There's no way I could pay you back, but at least I can cook. I don't need anything special. It's just not like I expect you to make borscht. I smirked. Borscht? What's that? Well, it's a soup. It includes red beet, cabbage, carrots, meat broth, Maybe something else, I don't even know. Borushkite. Kagome tried to pronounce it, a difficult word for a Japanese person. She smiled and went to bed. She closed the door to her room while I long remained in the kitchen, accompanied by the sound of the TV, thinking about how my life had ended up like this. Could things have gone differently? In other words, could I have just closed the door on Kagome and her grandfather as they smelled the smoke? Leave them on the street and just go on with my life without a second thought, forgetting about that unfortunate incident? Kagome basically left me no choice. After all, I did have a lot of free space at home, and she asked for nothing more than that. When a person receives a demand to give up something insignificant to meet a social expectation, they usually agree. Kagome wasn't demanding money, she just moved into the next room next to mine and began to cook breakfast, and occasionally lunch and dinner. To an extent, the situation resembled my relationship with Himitsu, but with her I could always lock the door from the inside, pretend to be sick, or just ignore her. But it's not so easy to ignore someone you live with. And the strangest thing was that there was the loss of an ephemeral sense of control that bothered me more than the fact that Kagome and her grandfather were living with me. Moriyuki-san was, in fact, a lovely old man who wasn't causing me any trouble. As for his granddaughter, I still couldn't decide how I was supposed to feel about Kagome, and how I wanted to. Under different circumstances, we would have graduated in half a year without saying a dozen words to each other, and would have never seen each other again. Of course, me meeting Ellie was also random to a degree, but at least we had something in common, that being music. In the case of Kagome, we were only connected by the fate that Kobayashi Corporation had caused pain to us both. And as is widely known, feelings born of a stressful situation rarely last long. But then again, feelings. Of course, it could well be due to the rumor that I'd gotten Kagome pregnant. Whether I wanted it or not, it made me imagine how life would pan out if that really happened. Don't think about a polar bear, huh? Or was it a monkey? My head was full of albino animals. I went to bed. Betty bye. 22. Okay, 22. I dreamed that Kagome was kidnapped and a ransom had been demanded from me. Of course, in the morning I forgot the details. The only thing I remembered was that there was someone else with me at home, a girl. It wasn't really a nighttime, more like a thriller full of suspense or nightmare. That's a real nightmare. Unfortunately, by the ending of the dream was wiped out by the first rays of the autumn sun, and Kagome's fate remained unclear. She'll be fine. Dream Kagome's fine. I opened my eyes and smelled something strange. A familiar scent from the kitchen. No freaking way. I jumped off the bed and ran out of my room. But Himitsu wasn't in the kitchen. Kagome was in charge of the stove. Oh, it's you. I wasn't too upset, just surprised. Nico-san! Kagome grew embarrassed. What? She made a vague gesture with her head, indicating that there was something wrong with me. I looked down and realized I was standing in the middle of the kitchen just in my underwear. Yeah, sorry. I knew a Russian many years ago before the war. Used to cook great borscht with those garlic buns. Pampushki. Cool. I suggested. Yeah, probably. I'm gonna get my other water bottle real quick. That's right, fellas. I got 2 water bottles here, not just one. Excuse me. Probably. Yay, water! Welcome back, Angel Love. Were you here the whole time? I forgot if you left for classes or not. But, glad you've stuck around. We sat at the kitchen table eating borscht for breakfast. For me, the choice of dishes was becoming a regular occurrence. Of course, this Kagome soup was different from Himitsu's, and was at most only a cousin to a normal borscht. You've still been here. Awesome. But the taste was recognizable, and good too. But where did you find the ingredients? Well, I won't argue. Beet red wasn't easy to find. But the rest can be found in any grocery store. I decided to not dwell on the fact that she'd have to have been woken up extremely early to buy all that. That she'd probably spend the last of her money on it. How much did you spend on that? I'll pay you back. I won't say no to that. Kagome smiled. I was about to go to my room to grab my wallet when someone knocked on the door. One, or more precisely, banging on it like they were trying to knock it down. I immediately realized there was no common guest and looked at Kagome, but she seemed like just as scared and perplexed as I was. But I couldn't just sit it out. I had to open the door. I summoned all the courage I had and walked into the hall. Uh-oh. The impatient guest turned out to be Kagemaru. Come along, Kobayashi Dono wishes to speak to you. He's looked killed any thoughts I had of arguing with him, but I still asked, can I have a few minutes at least? No. Put on your shoes and let's go. Nico-san? I turned around and saw Kagome, then looked at Kagemaru again. Apparently he wasn't in the least surprised by the fact that there was an unfamiliar girl at my place early in the morning. I know he's back. Can you believe that? See you at school. I told her, quickly put on my shoes and followed Kagemaru. What's this about? Kobayashi Dono will tell you everything. He grit his teeth. The drive seemed unbearably long to me, and it wasn't just because of the weekday traffic. Unsurprisingly, Kagemaru kept silent, and when I was afraid to start a conversation, it was clear that something had happened. It was also clear that I probably wasn't being brought into Kobayashi Corporation's offices in the morning to be killed. Too many witnesses for that. I tried to accept it and just patiently wait for the meeting with Kobayashi Jun, but keeping calm turned out to be no easy task. My hands were shaking. I felt cramped and choky on the back seat, as if I was suffocating. Finally, Kagemaru stopped the car right at the main entrance. A few minutes later, I was standing in the gigantic office of the head of the corporation. Nikolai, we've seen too much of each other of late. I just cannot say I'm happy about it. He looked focused and serious. Unfortunately, I haven't invited you for a pleasant talk this time either. Elizabeth has been kidnapped. What? Ellie's been kidnapped? He said and looked at me, clearly expecting some kind of reaction. Kidnapped? Was all I managed to force out. Do you know anything about this? Of course the old man wasn't in a joking mood, but it sounded like he was reporting the decrease in quarterly profit at the board assembly, rather than the kidnapping of his very own granddaughter. No, Kobayashi-san, I don't, I swear. It'd be strange to hear something different from you. But it's the truth. Elizabeth didn't return home yesterday, and in the morning her so-called kidnappers left a note in the mailbox saying she'd been kidnapped. He squinted crossed his fingers in front of his face, and continued. Naturally, they asked us not to inform the police and await further instructions. I didn't know what to do. Didn't know what Kobayashi Jun expected of me. Didn't know whether I was better off talking or remain silent. Who could have done that? Like any serious businessman, I have plenty of competitors, but kidnapping children is against the implied code of honor. If we used every possible means to achieve our objectives, the collateral damage would be far too high for everyone. I understand that, and so do the others. That's why I'm almost positive it was someone outside of that circle. The world of politics, big business, and crime was so far beyond me that I had nothing to say. That's why, Nikolai, I started to suspect people Elizabeth has met recently. I was at home the whole day yesterday, and I have witnesses to confirm it. That's good. The old man leaned back in his armchair. Kobayashi-sama, you don't think it's me, right? Why would I kidnap Ellie-san? I'm not a detective or a forensic psychiatrist. Besides, I have no desire to get inside someone else's head, especially that of an impulsive teenager. His words made me uncomfortable, like a t-shirt label scratching against my back, but it didn't seem like he really suspected me. Otherwise, Kagemaru probably would have been asking the questions. Maybe, contrary to what he was saying, Kobayashi Jun wanted to test me to see if I knew something Ellie was hiding from him. Kobayashi-sama, you should understand that I don't know Ellie-san that well. Sure, she invited me to play in her band, but my circumstances have changed, and it was quite reckless of you to deny such a generous offer. Maybe, but for now I have no time for music. You see, a classmate of mine turned to me for help. Her restaurant burned down, is that correct? Obviously he knew without me having to tell him. Yes, that's right. So yesterday, the whole day, Except where had Kagome been until late at night? The whole day I was at home, and I have witnesses. I still paused, but forced myself to continue as if nothing happened. How convenient. You don't believe me? Nikolai, it's not whether I believe you or not. What matters is whether Elizabeth is safe. Well, yeah. Who would argue with that? Can you remember anything else that might be important? I thought about it. Kawashima's and Asakura's arrogant faces came to mind. A revolt? The old man clearly knew about Kagome's restaurant being burned to the ground. What did he know about our conflict with Kawashima's gang? I prudently decided to remain silent. No, Kobayashi-san, nothing for now. But if you remember something. He sighed and stood up. I'll bid you goodbye for today, but this conversation isn't over yet. Kagemaru brought me to the first floor and pushed me off out of the lift. You can find the right way. I passed the turnstile, sunk deep in thought, and bumped right into a European-looking man in a strict business suit. Who the heck is this guy now? Keep meeting new people like all the time. Excuse me, I muttered and headed for the exit of Kobayashi Corporation building. But I didn't go home. Instead, I rushed straight to school. Okay. School. Kagome's busy evenings, her grudge against Ellie. Did I really suspect her of kidnapping Kobayashi Jun's granddaughter? It didn't seem like Kagome had the means to pull something like that off. But did she have the motivation? It's not easy to kidnap even the most average person, let alone the heir to Kobayashi Corporation. But Kagome's behavior of later suddenly began to seem just way too strange to me. Irina was another suspect. She'd already shown interest in my relationship with Ellie, and more importantly was just kind of person from outside the circle Kobayashi Jun had been talking about. It was clear that the old man knew many secrets KGB was interested in, and quite importantly, Irina wasn't burdened by the infamous Japanese code of honor, but I couldn't interrogate her, and I couldn't talk to Kagome. You just ate some dinner? Nice. What kind of dinner did you eat, Eliza? I didn't want to storm into the kitchen, into the classroom, in the middle of the lesson, so I had to wait for a break. Finally, the bell rang, and as soon as the teacher walked out, I ran over to Kagome. Fortunately, she'd gone to school today. A salmon dish. Ooh. I hope it was tasty. And good and tasty. Let's have a talk. Nico-san, is everything alright? The surprise was quite appropriate, but something about it seemed feigned to me. We're about to find out. Let me lower this a bit. Cool glare is happening. I grabbed Kagome by the hand and walked to the hallway. It was okay. That's good. Ellie's missing. She's been kidnapped. What? Not here. She hissed at me and walked toward the stairs. Indeed, on the roof we could talk without any witnesses. Cold autumn wind wailed through the ventilation grills, making the place far less cozy than it had been just a couple weeks ago. Ellie's missing. She's been kidnapped, I repeated. Do you know anything about it? No. Kagome's face didn't even twitch. I looked at her closely, trying to detect any signs that my words weren't news for her, but Kagome remained impenetrable to me. Are you sure? Nico-san, are you trying to suggest I kidnapped Kobayashi? You have your reasons. How would I do that? She smirked and walked toward the railing. Oh, you were wandering around God knows where the last couple days. I've been looking for my father. She suddenly exclaims angrily. Yes, but for so long? I responded in a less confident tone. Nico-san, I don't have to report where I go to you. And even if I wanted to, don't you think there are other people who have issues with Kobayashi? Like who, for instance? For instance, Asakura wasn't at school yesterday. Her skipping school a single day isn't grounds for an accusation. Yet you're accusing me because I've allegedly been wandering around. She was probably right about that. I let my emotions get the better of me. I'm not accusing you. I just had a very unpleasant conversation with Kobayashi Jun, and he suspects me. You, Nico-san? Kagome scoffed nastily. Me? Yes. But if you're here, you must not be the primary suspect. What else did he tell you? That they got a note in which the kidnappers demanded that he didn't go to the police and awaited further instructions. Kidnappers? So there are several of them? God, I don't know. I went to the bench and sat down. Interesting. Interesting what? First you try to help me, then my restaurant mysteriously burns down, and now Kobayashi gets kidnapped. If I were you, I suspect me too. So Nico-san, I don't blame you. But think about it. Did I storm into Kobayashi's house in the middle of the day, kill all the guards, tie her up, and carry her away? Or do I have a Yakuza for accomplices? Oh, sorry, that's the limits of my imagination. Maybe you can come up with something more believable, Nico-san. I bit my lip and turned away. Yes, it was hard to link Kagome to the kidnapping. Suspicion alone wasn't enough. So what about Asakura, Nico-san? She would have easily been able to lure Kobayashi somewhere deserted, and then Asakura, Kawashima, and then their gang did have significantly more resources. Gotta do more stretches, guys. But why would they do that? Perhaps they didn't quite get along with Kobayashi. They'd been getting along before. Meeting you has changed a lot, Nico-san. You have a bad influence on women. She smiled, and I grew embarrassed. If they're capable of arson, they might be capable of this too. You have class. I'll see you later, Angel. Have a good flippin' class. And I'll hopefully see you either later on or tonight. Bye! But events really were happening at a breakneck speed. Wanted to tell Kobayashi Jun about our other problems with them, but I couldn't make up my mind. Well, you should have, she said without a hint of anger. Well, yeah, but then I'd have to tell him about you and Ellie not getting along. Kagome thought about that. Then maybe you were right not to do it after all. You don't seem to be afraid of Kobayashi Jun at all. Not more than the circumstances demand. Yeah, well, if she'd been in my shoes in that office, she'd be singing a different tune. Why are you smiling? Nothing, just thinking that you two have something in common. Really? Kagome was genuinely surprised. You're both stubborn and willing to climb over other people to get to your goal. I don't know who you think I am. It was a joke, calm down. In any case, being compared to a person like that is flattering. You're welcome. Alright, Nico-san, you have a good reason to skip class today, but I need to go. Can I expect you for lunch? Of course. Kagome smiled mysteriously and ran away. Somewhat unfortunately, I had to admit that she had persuaded me of her innocence. I really couldn't imagine a way Kagome could have kidnapped Ellie alone, and it was very minimum strange to imagine that she had accomplices, even that she has great trouble making even regular friends. What's the forecast for tomorrow? Things kept escalating like this. I had to prepare for giant robots to invade Tokyo sometime this weekend. Robots! I left the school and walked slowly toward home. Should have asked Kagome whether Asakura had been at school. Well, I could ask her during lunch, which I still had to make. For some reason, I desperately wanted to focus on going to the store, choosing the best produce and turned it into a meal that people besides myself would enjoy. That's exactly what I did. Shopping always makes you feel better, even if it's only for food. I returned home from the store, loaded with groceries. In order for Kagome to truly show her cooking skills, she'd need supplies. Strangely enough, Moriyuki-san's shoes weren't in the hall, but the bags, their weight pleasantly pulling on my hands, didn't let me focus too much on the fact. Hopped to the kitchen and froze. Oh gosh, here we go. Sitting casually at the table, legs crossed, was Irina. Don't worry, Nikolai, the old man went to the market. I immediately felt relieved. What are you doing here? I asked coldly, walking past her, put the bags on the table, and began to sort out what I'd bought. Aren't you happy to see me? She exclaimed with disappointment. Let's skip the niceties. What a pity. That's what I came here for. I drew myself away from the food and looked at her with disbelief. Wanted to praise you for a brilliantly conducted operation. Operation? Why, of course, the kidnapping of Kobayashi's granddaughter. What, you seriously believe it was me? My laughter was almost hysterical, but Irina didn't show any surprise. What else could it be? Kobayashi Jun wouldn't lie about his granddaughter's kidnapping, would he? So what? Is that a reason to suspect me? How do you imagine I pulled that off? That's what I want to hear, with details if you could. She moved forward and rested her chin on her interlocked fingers. That's nonsense. I started to get angry. The situation had stopped being just strange and was turning into a farce. Nikolai, don't be shy. She began to whine, pretending to be a bimbo student. You know what? I can understand why Kobayashi Jun might suspect me, but you know that I'm just a normal high schooler. Irina frowned. The expression of a friendly naivete vanished off her face at once. So you're saying you have nothing to do with it, and your new friend Iwamura was it too? Kagome was just a student, same as me. I paused to think of what I was going to say next. Of course, she had more reasons to be upset with Kobayashi Corporation, but that on its own means nothing. If all you needed for revenge was a desire for it, then there would be significantly fewer people on the planet right now. And why are you being spied on? By who? The Japanese. In a different situation, wouldn't have risked coming here, but I really want to know how you managed it. I didn't kidnap Ellie. Calm down, there's no need to shout. She looked around. You might be heard. Well, let them hear. Everybody should know I have nothing to hide. What a nice development, then. It's nobody's fault. Irina dramatically flung her arms in the air. It's stupid to suspect the Japanese. The Americans have nothing to do with it, nor us. Who was it then? Flying saucers? Maybe. I calmed down a little and looked at the situation from Irina's point of view for the first time. It did seem pretty strange, and I could have just assumed that an accident happened to her, if not for the note. You know about that too? Kobayashi-jun really wants his granddaughter back. His actions were hard not to notice. So, Nikolai, I was sure it was you. She made a pause and then smiled cunningly. And your friend? How much did I really trust Kagome? I couldn't try to persuade Irina that she wasn't involved in all I wanted, but if I myself had doubts, the KGB major would definitely notice. Unfortunately, I still wasn't totally sure Kagome had nothing to do with Ellie's disappearance. If you exclude all the other options, then what remains is true, no matter how improbable. No way I could tell that to Irina, though. You could as well be blaming Asukura's and Kawashima's gang, Ellie's school friends. They haven't had the greatest relationship recently, and they were most likely the ones who set Kagome's restaurant on fire. What, really? Irina showed seemingly genuine interest. You can find out yourself. Asakura is from my class. Kawashima is from Ellie's. There are a few others, but they aren't important. And what would they achieve by kidnapping her? And what would we achieve by doing that? Well, in the case of your friend, the motive is clear. She wants to get her father back. I asked on reflex and immediately scolded myself for it. She was right, and I had nothing else to say. Hey, Mafia babe. Welcome back. How you doing? Not much has happened, Mafia babe. Not really much has happened too much. Except that Ellie has been kidnapped! I didn't know their reason. I don't know anything about the lives of people born with a silver spoon in their mouth. It's a fertile soil for developing your political literacy. Are you serious? I forgot all about the groceries I had to put in the fridge, walked to the table and sat down across from Irina, indicating as hard as I could that I wanted to finish the conversation as soon as possible. Well, Nikolai, I'll have to think about what you just said. She reluctantly stood up and looked around, as if trying to find something in my kitchen. As I recall, I can get into the back alley from your yard. I sighed in desperation. Follow me, please. Once Irina was through the hole in the fence and out onto the narrow path someone had left between the plots of land, I returned to the kitchen to think. So I'm under surveillance. Walked into the window carefully peeked outside. Of course, the telecommunications van you'd see in a spy movie was nowhere to be found. In fact, there were no cars parked on our boring street. But Irina wouldn't lie about me being spied on. There was no doubt about that. Kobayashi-jun had made it clear he wasn't going to trust anyone's word when it came to his granddaughter's life. Her life. I really didn't want Ellie to get hurt or worse. Even if we never saw each other again, I had nothing but deep sympathy for the girl. Maybe it was mutual. Maybe in another life I'd have a chance to take our relationship to another level. But now I had to take care of Kagome and her grandfather. I could feel the bond between us getting stronger by the day, as if we were criminals robbing one bank after another. Bonnie and Clyde. Not that I had any desire to end up the way they did. Somebody knocked on the door. Kagome's grandfather returned from the market. Moriyuki-san. I exclaimed, grabbing him by the hand and pulling him inside. Where have you been? Good afternoon, Nico-kun. I was buying groceries, see? He shook a burlap bag in front of me. Yes, and you let a perfect stranger in. A perfect stranger? You mean that lovely lady from social services? Social services? I smirked powerlessly. Well done, Irina. Yes, she told me you were being compensated for our property burning down and gave me 10,000 yen. Can you believe it? Ooh, nice. 10,000 yen? I grumbled when we entered the kitchen. Didn't you think that's just a little too little for a burned-down restaurant? Well, I was just happy the government remembered us at all. And you weren't surprised by the fact that the social worker wasn't Japanese? That did surprise me at first. He spent a moment in thought. But she was so polite and nice. I don't doubt it. I sat on the chair and turned away from him. The old half-wit would probably let burglars in without a second thought. Moriyuki-san? The old man responded as if waking up. Do you know? Try to formulate the questions on the go. Where Kagome has been going lately? She told me she looked for her father, but I want to ask if she might be of any acquaintances or friends. Acquaintances? Friends? The old man put the bag on the table and sat in the chair Irina had just occupied 5 minutes ago. Alright, another drink time. Whew. A table. He folded his arms like a chess grandmaster, and thinking over his next move and started talking. I don't know much about Kagome-chan's life before she had moved to the restaurant. Her mother divorced Shinji when the girl was very young, and we almost never talked. If it had happened a couple of years later, Kagome-chan and I would have probably remained strangers. What did her mother die from? Sorry to ask. Cancer. She was very ill. I see. I was never quite good at expressing sympathy, and I didn't know what to say in this sort of situation. Should I have shouted about how sorry I was and tried to comfort him? I know. Poor, her mom. Wouldn't that come across as insincere? Or maybe it was better to remain silent, but then I'd be seen as heartless. Although the old man didn't react in any way to my casual "I see" and continued. Of course Kagome-chan talked to her father, but I don't think she'd ever thought she'd need to move to our place. You see, she and her mother lived in Shiroken, and naturally, such a change of environment can be a shock. In Shiroken? I repeated as if he'd just given me the solution to a problem that I've been trying to solve for a long time. What did Kagome's mother do for work? I don't really know. It was some sort of desk job as far as I remember. It was pretty vague, but I decided not to pry further. Kagome-chan had just started at your school when it all happened. The illness was so sudden. San was so young. And she didn't leave anything? They really used to live in Shiroken. Hard to believe Kagome's mother didn't leave any money behind. Oh, fudge. A funeral and other arrangements were handled by Shinji. Of course I didn't know anything about Kagome's father, but I found it hard to believe he'd steal his ex-wife's fortune. Maybe like many people nowadays, they'd live on an untick. That's the only thing Kagome would have inherited would be debts. At least now I knew how she ended up at her school. Didn't Kagome tell you anything herself? About what? Well, for example, I don't know. I couldn't ask the old man directly whether his granddaughter was capable of kidnapping a person. What was her life in Shiroken like? Definitely better than living in an old restaurant by a port. I'm old, Nico-kun, but not out of my mind yet. Could it be that Kagome had sat and spent her entire life at the bottom of the pyramid? Naturally, even then, her position wouldn't be comparable to Ellie's. But Kawashima's or Asakura's? Quite possibly. Hey, Mei-mei. You're at school right now. You wanted to say hello? Hello. How's school going? Are you surviving it somehow? You can get through it. It's only... Oh, crap. It's only Monday. Ah, crud. Well, you got this, Mei-mei. I'll see you hopefully soon, alright? Are you streaming tonight? Or anytime soon? After my parents' death, I hadn't lost much in terms of money, so it was hard for me to imagine what it felt like, not only losing one's mother, but also moving from Shiroken to an old restaurant or a port. Nobody asked her to help at the restaurant we were managing somehow. She volunteered for it. He suddenly smiled, and at first she couldn't do a single thing. I marveled at how someone couldn't manage even the simplest recipes, but still she put in so much effort, and little by little got so good at cooking that we even started getting more guests, but somewhat even specifically for Kagome-chan's cooking. That's worthy of respect. but I always knew that she was forced to adapt to the new environment in the beginning. Kagome-chan almost never talked to me or Shinji, as if he pursed his lips, gaining an exclusive and elusive resemblance to Kagome, as if we were the ones to blame for her mother's death. It's hard to lose a parent. I've gone through it, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. There were many orphans after the war, but back then people saw many things differently. Now you have TVs, telephones everywhere, rockets being launched into space, but in our time, people seem to be more genuine and kinder, I suppose. I'm sure everyone eventually thinks things used to be better in their time. Even when Shinji was little, he stopped talking, so lost in his own thoughts, I couldn't even hope he'd return anytime soon. But then the old man suddenly raised his eyes, for the first time clear and full of understanding. Gifts of Sea was built by my father at the turn of the century. In a sense, my entire life has been spent in that restaurant. I don't know who would need me now or why. I had nothing to say for the second time and started to feeling uncomfortable sitting next to him, but the doorbell saved me. Kagome had returned from school. Oh, you brought groceries. Perfect! She noticed the bags standing on the table and began to sort out the products. Kagome opened the fridge and found out it was full already. Are you preparing for war or what? Moriyuki-san seemed to be trapped in his memories of the past and couldn't quite switch from that difficult conversation to his daily life. I'll leave you young ones alone, the old man said, not addressing anyone in particular. Stood up with was an effort and walked to his room. What is it with him? Nostalgia. What were you talking about? Nothing in particular. I definitely needed time to digest all that new information about Kagome. Nico-san, she frowned. All right, lunch. I was about to start cooking but forgot. How did you live without me? She smiled and grabbed the apron. How'd I live? It's called Himitsu. I was sitting at the same spot, thoughtfully watching Kagome make lunch. I couldn't get Kagome's grandfather's story out of my head, but I also had to inform her about Irina's visit. Do you remember what I said about the woman from the KGB? Yeah. She didn't turn around, but the knife in her hand lost some of its speed. So she was here today. And she thinks it's me who kidnapped Ellie. You? Kagome laughed sardonically. Or you. I wasn't really ready for that reaction. So the KGB suspects us? I tried to persuade Irina that I had nothing to do with it. What about me? Well, I put in a good word for you too. How courteous of you, Nico-san. Of course, I wouldn't have preferred to be sure actually was innocent. And what should we expect from her? I don't know. Well, so you know her, not me. Saying I know her is an overstatement. You get what I'm talking about, Nico-san? Kagome was starting to get angry. Well, it seemed to me that my arguments weren't good enough for her, at least for the time being. On the other hand, Irina had a point. What do you mean? Well, no matter who you pick, the Japanese, the Russians, the Americans, it seemed like nobody's to blame. But Ellie had been kidnapped. What about her friends? Did you mention that? I didn't respond immediately. Nico-san! I did. Maybe Irina will manage to dig out something the others haven't. Excellent. Kagome said with deep satisfaction. Such a reaction seemed a little sacrilegious, and I wanted to change the subject. Oh, and your grandfather let Irina in, took her money, went off to the market, leaving her alone here. I'll talk to him, she replied calmly, if you would be so kind. I suddenly noticed something weird around Kagome's legs. Her knees were curved slightly inwards. Why do all Japanese girls have such strange bone structure? And also, Moriyuki-san told me a bit about your mother. I didn't really want to start this conversation, expecting she wouldn't be happy about to hear it, but curiosity got the better of me. Did he? Kagome reacted to my words with barely concealed irritation. Yes, I'm so sorry. My parents died immediately, and I didn't have to watch them suffer day after day. It was a long time ago. And you used to live in Shiroken? That was also a long time ago, Nico-san. And he said you used to be really bad at cooking, and that I found hardest to believe. So you aren't happy with my food? Don't eat it. It'll be easier for me. Her smirk bore no anger. I'm happy with anyone's cooking as long as I don't have to cook myself. Kagome suddenly drew herself away from making lunch, turned around, wiped her hands with a towel, and looked admonishing at me. You know, Nico-san, if you ever want to compliment a girl, don't say anything like that. Yeah, and you're an expert on compliments. I laughed for no reason. Maybe I was different when I lived in Shiroken. What would you know? Were you? What if? The water boiled, so she had to go back to cooking. It was hard for me to imagine that Kagome used to be different. We often smirk when we hear something along the lines of, "I was slim when I was young." Did you ever imagine that fat slob that fit as a fit young man? Could I imagine Kagome as a talkative, friendly, cheerful girl? And most importantly, could she have changed so radically in only a couple of years? On the other hand, if it was true, then I could somewhat better understand her dislike for Ellie. Maybe Kagome believed she had been blatantly robbed or something like that was hers by right. Do you miss it? What? Shirokan, those times. Nostalgia is counterproductive. Do you only do things that are productive? She accidentally knocked down a plate at the edge of the table, sending it to shatter across the floor. I'll clean it up. You know, we have a saying that broken dishes are good luck, and we say that a broken plate is a loss. She bent over to pick up the fragments and grumbled, "Your place is so dirty, Nico-kun. Seriously, it feels like you're living in a stable." I really wasn't a fan of cleaning, not to mention the honor of it normally fell to Himitsu, but I still wouldn't say that it was fair to compare my house to a stable. "May I clean up after dinner?" "May you?" I repeated as if making sure I heard her correctly. "So I can say no? It's your house." Kagome scoffed with discontent. "Alright, you may, but I'll help. As long as you're out of my way." She smiled. We then started to clean the house. We spent a while searching for the vacuum cleaner since I didn't actually know where Himitsu kept it. "Have you been living here long?" "My entire life, since I moved to Japan." "And you don't remember where anything is in your house?" She frowned. "Well, you see, I don't do all this stuff myself often. So you have servants, too." "Something like that." I tried to finish this unpleasant conversation as quickly as possible. Cleaning took a lot of time and for whatever reason came particularly hard for me. I grew tired and sweaty almost immediately, even though I seemingly hadn't put in too much effort. Ugh. How did Himitsu manage to run around with a mop and rag the whole day and never got tired, or at least not show it? Kagome turned out to be more prepared for housework. "A restaurant must always be kept clean," she said with pride. I had no reason to not believe her. At some point, her grandfather attempted to help us, but Kagome strictly forbade it. His back wasn't good. He'd fall apart in the process, is what she said. I was sure he would too. Something as simple as cleaning suddenly caused me to feel a surge of positive emotions. I was disgusted to admit it, but for a short time, I began to feel not completely useless. Kagome also seemed happy. She clearly enjoyed anything she could do well. You're practically glowing, you know. Kagome was mopping the floor around the fridge, raising her head, and looked at me in surprise. "Hopefully not because you've got an exposed wire somewhere here." When we were finished, I was so exhausted that I just fell to the floor next to the kotatsu. "Thanks for helping, Nico-san." "No, thank you." Well, time for dinner." I noted, surprised that she had energy to cook, but didn't say anything out loud. Dinner was delicious as always. I didn't know whether I'd be able to learn to cook so quickly if I were in Kagome's shoes. Probably not, to be honest. The vast majority of people tend to give up on things, when they realize that clever hands aren't enough to handle them. It's also about the feedback. Most people want immediate results and aren't willing to want and bear the discomfort. I remembered my mother telling me about that, but if good advice could change a person's behavior, by now humanity would be colonizing the solar system instead of wasting time with pointless internal conflicts. "Kagome-chan, your cooking is even better than usual. What did you add to the curry?" "A bit of sweet pepper." "Wonderful. I'll have to remember that." He turned to me and squinted slyly. "Nico-kun, you're a good influence on Kagome-chan." "Grandfather, come on." I forced myself to wash the dishes, and then we just sat at the table, resting, while Moriyuki-san walked out to the yard and fell asleep there. The peaceful atmosphere at home was definitely making me comfortable, but at the same time seemed somehow unnatural. As if we were in the eye of the storm. "Nico-san, are you worried about something?" "Of course I am, aren't you? I'm just trying to appreciate the moment while it's here." "Good for you." I wanted to add something to that, but suddenly someone knocked on the door quietly. So quietly that I didn't even realize at first that the sound came from the hall. "Did you hear that?" "Yes." I tensed up and waited. The knocking repeated, now louder. "You expecting guests?" "Yeah, throwing a party." I flung off, stood up, and walked to the front door. Oh, who's it gonna be this time, guys? When had I last thought of Himitsu? Hey, it's Himitsu, guys. Yay. I couldn't remember, but she was our late guest. Nico-kun, good evening. Her forced politeness raised a red flag. Yeah, hi, has something happened? I turned around and happily noticed that Kagome had prudently decided to stay in the kitchen. That's what I want to ask you. Now what about me? I laughed stupidly and scratched my nape. Nico-kun, I know that Iwamura-senpai is living with you now. You do, huh? All in all, that was to be expected. Sure, since Himitsu lived across the road, she'd sooner or later notice that the house got new tenants. Can I come in? Yes, sure. In the kitchen, Himitsu greeted Kagome very formally. Good evening, Iwamura-senpai. Good evening. The latter tried to hide her surprise as hard as she could, but I'd already learned to recognize the shades of emotion on Kagome's face. I quickly noticed she wasn't too happy about my friend's late visit. You see, it just so happened that Iwamura's house burned down, so I'm letting her and her grandfather stay at my place until... Looked at Kagome, seeking support, but apparently he wasn't too concerned about what Himitsu thought of the situation. Until they decide what to do next. Is that right, Iwamura-san? That naming made Kagome pucker her lips tight, but she replied quite calmly, Right, Nico-san. Nico-kun, if you need anything, I'm happy to help. We have all we need, I think. My words sounded silly, the awkward silence becoming unbearable. It seemed like it's taken Himitsu a lot of effort for her to come here, but I simply had nothing to say to her right now. Yes, there was another girl in my house, and it wasn't even Catherine. Yes, my explanation sounded weird, and she probably took it as at best a half-truth. Iwamura-senpai, I'm sorry that your house burned down. Thank you. She replied begrudgingly. I've known Nico-kun my entire life. He might be unbearable at times, but he's generally a good person. Thanks for the compliment. I'll try to remember that. Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me. Bye. Once Himitsu was gone, I felt relieved. Very nice of her to drop by and check on you. I'm just surprised she didn't go do so earlier. Well, Himitsu, you see, I can't say it's easy for her to see. Me in your house? Kagome finished my thought. Well, yes. Does she have feelings for you? I sighed heavily and turned away. It was unbearable to look at her like that at that moment. I don't want to discuss my relationship with Himitsu right now. We're just friends. You feel guilty. I didn't know it was a question or a statement. Why would I? Because you also have feelings for her? As I recall, you're a future economics student, yet you're acting like an amateur psychologist. Alright, sorry, it isn't really any of my business. Kagome smiled, conciliatory. By the way, how is that foreign girl in our class doing? Catherine? What about her? Well, she demonstratively rolled her eyes. Actually, I really don't know how she was doing. Maybe she was on a date with Michael. Maybe she was even already in his bed. Nico-san, you seem to be enjoying unexpectedly popularity with the girls of our school. Oh, Catherine couldn't care less about me. Believe me. If you say so. She already found a new suitor. I'm not insisting you tell me. It's just to keep the conversation going. I looked at Kagome. Her pose as she sat on the chair was casual and relaxed, and her smile mysterious. One could imagine that she was more experienced older sister about to give me advice on how to talk to a woman. You know what, Iwamura-san? I can deal with all that myself. Hope you haven't left a spot for me in your harem. What the? I'm very grateful for your help, Nico-san, but not that grateful. Yeah, whatever. Kagome's jokes stung more than they should have. You're so serious today, Nico-san. One of us has to be, I guess. I spent the rest of the evening with a book in my hands and no idea what Kagome did. While I was walking to their room to say goodnight, the lights were already off. Another crazy day was over. I only just had to get in bed and close my eyes. Yet I was tortured by the feelings of something left unsaid or undone, as if I had to leave a theater in the middle of a performance. Ellie, her grandfather, Irina, Kagome, her grandfather, Himitsu, Catherine, all the actors had stayed to finish the play, the finale of which I was destined not to see. The end. Good night. Nico-san, wake up! Heard somebody's persistent voice in my dream. We'll be late for school. Sunshine, just 5 more minutes. What the hell did you just call me? I opened my eyes, but instead of Himitsu, I saw Kagome leaning over me. "Oh, it's you." "Disappointed?" "A little. What time is it?" "Late enough to not make it to school on time." "Nah, it's fine. She's living with us. So, it's all good." "Hopefully all good?" She kept standing, waiting. "Well, what? Maybe you'll let me get dressed?" Yeah, sorry." Kagome blushed and ran out of my room. We had a quick breakfast and left for school. "We might be good." "Hope so. No signs of death so far." "So that's good, huh? I was trying to wake you up for an hour. Get used to it." I scoffed, at the same time trying to drive back the stubborn yawning. Thank God I won't be needing to tolerate it for long. Her words somehow stung me, like if an old friend had told me that they were moving abroad forever. What, Nico-san? Did you hope you found a free cook?" "Guess I did," I said brutally in response and picked up my pace. We split up closer to school, and I just had to stand and wait for Kagome to move ahead. Our classroom was in turmoil. Everyone was broken up into small groups feverishly discussing something. Only Kagome sat alone, her head resting on her head, looking out the window. Michael approached. "Have you heard what happened, Nick?" "No." "Kobayashi Ellie was kidnapped." "Kidnapped? By who?" "They say Asakura had a hand in it." "Asakura?" I exclaimed. Michael squinted and tilted his head strangely. "It's like you're not surprised she was kidnapped at all." "Why, of course, because it's me keeping Ellie hostage in my basement." "Michael, seriously." "I'm serious." Fine. What are they saying?" "That Asakura and a girl from Kobayashi's class, Kawashima." "Yes, Kawashima. Seems like they had an argument about something." "An argument?" I smirked. "Either way, they've been detained and are now being interrogated at the police station." "Where did the information come from?" "Everyone just knows it. Maybe someone overheard the teachers." What a trustworthy source. Wanted to add something else, but the bell rang. Was Kagome right after all? The situation was developing a bit too rapidly. Plus, if I were to look at Asakura and Kawashima, in just a few days they'd gone from smearing swear words on my door and breaking a window to setting a restaurant on fire and kidnapping people. On the other hand, I had no reason to defend them. And no desire, more importantly, except that if they were actually innocent, imprisoning them wouldn't help find Ellie. During the break, I nodded at Kagome, indicating that I wanted to talk. I didn't want to go to the roof today, so I brought her to the old school wing. After all, today we certainly weren't going to bump into Ellie here. "Well, happy now?" "I am, and I'm not going to hide it." She grinned and looked into my eyes in a way I found embarrassment. What if they have nothing to do with it? What matters is finding Ellie, not getting revenge on Kawashima. Personally, I'm not too worried about what happens to Kobayashi. Right, what am I saying? Nico-san, don't tell me you pity them. If they're innocent, even if you assume they had nothing to do with Kobayashi's kidnappings, it was definitely them who burned down my restaurant. Well, if that's what you believe, don't you? It just seems to me that... I sighed and looked at the door of my old music class. Things are getting too intense too quickly. First vandalism, then arson, now kidnapping? I'm willing to admit that at least Kawashima isn't an idiot, but isn't this a little too much? Besides, don't forget that they actually worship Ellie, and they had something to lose. Do you think they know who the loss is, or what loss is? Kagome scoffed with disdain. I don't think they burning with desire to find out. She noticed the direction of my gaze and jerked her shoulders in irritation. Nico-san, it sounds like you're defending them. I'm not defending anyone. I just want to learn the truth and rescue Ellie. You seem to be too concerned about her. Something happens to the granddaughter of the head of Kobayashi Corporation, we might all be found guilty. You haven't forgotten that I was in his office just recently, right? Is that the only reason? The only reason? I flung my arms up in the air and stepped away from Kagome, demonstrating my extreme disappointment in her lack of foresight. I thought, I'm planning on making it to graduation, and if I remember right, you were going to get into a university too. But there's no blame on us for Kobayashi's disappearance, so what should we be afraid of? Are you sure there isn't? I only said it out of pure contrarianism. Sometimes you just want to say something back so badly you can't keep quiet, even knowing the consequences of your pointless remark. Well then, why don't you take me to the police? Will that make you feel better? Kagome got predictably mad. I said we, not you. Maybe I kidnapped her, but now I have amnesia and I don't remember. I don't know about amnesia, but you definitely have amnesia. She prepared to leave, then suddenly stopped. But right, I need to go to the police station after school. I'm telling you now so you won't complain about my absence later. What for? She frowned. My restaurant was burned down, remember? The world doesn't revolve around your Kobayashi. But Kagome wasn't listening and quickly walked in the direction of her classroom. Even every long fall is inevitable, followed by a rise. But we had reached the lowest point of our graph? We'll get lower. We always do. Am I right? No one followed me. Did Kobayashi Jun also believe that children were to blame? Children? Children, I smirked inside. What else would I call them? Teenagers? Well, that didn't change much. Children can be far more cruel than adults because they can't distinguish between good and evil. When they were children, did anyone bother to explain to Kawashima and Ko how they were supposed to behave? But the matter with Ellie was still unresolved. I couldn't imagine them kidnapping Kagome, but it didn't appear like they had any problems with their leader. Moriyuki-san was watching a meaningless TV show and was happy to see me back. Good afternoon, Nico-kun. Kagome went to the police after school. Did you know about that? Maybe. I can't remember. Alright. Had to make a lunch, but as soon as I opened the fridge, the doorbell rang. According to Chaos Theory, anyone could be standing at my doorstep, and Himitsu to the Prime Minister of Japan. Ah! Hey, Kuja! Welcome back to the stream. I haven't seen you in a long time. I am doing good, thank you. I'm reading a very cool and very long visual novel. But yeah, how have you been? But it was just Irina. Nikolai, so good to find you home. First, you knew perfectly well that I was home. Second, isn't it dangerous to show up at my front door in the middle of the day? Having a healthy meal. Ooh, what you eatin'? What healthy meal you munchin' on? Don't worry, you aren't under surveillance anymore. Thank God. I said with irony, but this piece of news did bring me sufficient relief. Will you invite me in? A potato, lettuce, cucumber, boiled egg, prawn salad with seafood sauce on it. Yeah, that's pretty healthy. I wouldn't mind, having that. Cucumber. I like cucumbers. Cucumbers are good. If I'm not being watched, we can talk outside. I turned around and looked at the hall. Moriyuki-san is at home. Oh, but we already know each other. Irina exclaimed cheerfully, and yet, as you wish, she frowned. We walked to the road, and I leaned over against the fence and crossed my arms over my chest. You must have already heard about the police detained several students from your school. I have. Do you believe me now? How would I put it? She sniffed and looked around. I never noticed how cozy your neighborhood is. Well, Irina thought for a moment, then finally replied in a serious tone. I don't know what kind of relationship you have at school, but those kids are just kids. They wouldn't be able to kidnap Kobayashi Ellie while her guards were watching. And we have no information on that kind of, let's say, clash took place. You don't believe they're involved either? Either? A school friend was doubting that too. A friend, huh? Is that all? Nikolai, it feels like you're interrogating me. She wrapped her arms around herself and pretended to shy away from me. You also shouldn't forget that most of the kids that go to your school aren't from normal families. You got a Greek yogurt with fresh blueberries. Aww, I miss those yogurts that we can put things in. Oh, those were great. I ate them all the time way back in the day. Hey, enjoy it, Kuja. Enjoy the delicious. If you want my opinion, I think they were framed. By who? Irina waved her finger in front of my face. I don't have all the answers, but you at least don't suspect me anymore, right? You can suspect a criminal, but if you really have been the one who kidnapped Kobayashi Ellie, you'd be a hero to us. I see. In any case, it seems like it must have been someone outside the system, and if you know anyone like that, I suggest you take a very close look at them. Why does it sound like you're hinting at someone in particular? And who would that be? Say Iwamura. Irina took us a couple steps away from me. Even if I wanted to be your friend, and why would you? Because then we'd know the whereabouts of Kobayashi Ellie. Do you want to know that? Well, we can't abandon a poor girl in trouble. Yeah, sure. I repeat, even if I wanted to be your friend, I don't believe she'd be able to pull it off. You just don't know Kagome. I smirked. You want to tell me something important about her? Cut down from eating too much junk. That is a good idea. Don't want to get too, chubby, you know what I mean? Never, never healthy. She squinted cunningly. No, nothing really. Fine then. Irina looked at her watch and moved to a strand of hair from her face. We'll keep in touch. Don't disappear. Where would I anyway? I grumbled after she left. Kagome returned from her visit with the police in the evening. Moriyuki-san was sleeping, while I sat in the kitchen pointlessly flipping through the pages of a book, unable to comprehend any of the words in it. It's as quiet as a graveyard in here, Kagome said in surprise when she walked into the kitchen. I was waiting for you. Well, here I am. Kagome didn't look to be in too good of a mood. Nobody's thought about dinner yet, I assume. I was waiting for you, I repeated in the same gloomy tone. Nico-san, I told you I'd go to the police. And how did it go? Nothing definitive yet. What? Nothing at all? Well, they believe it was arson. No one in the neighborhood provided any useful information. No one saw or heard anything. Oh, another unfollow happened. Great! No one saw or heard anything. I see. I felt strangely upset at her, but couldn't quite grasp the reason why. But I still had to tell her about Irina. That woman from the KGB came today. She said we were no longer under surveillance. That's great news. I continued, ignoring her enthusiasm. But she thinks Kawashima's gang was framed. Hang on, can I check something, guys? It's gonna bug me for a bit. Don't worry about it. Okay. I think all is good. Okay, all's good. Alright. Gang was framed. By who? She doesn't know. Kagome looked at me carefully for a couple seconds, then walked to the fridge and began to take out ingredients to make dinner. Do you agree with her? She got a point. It would be stupid to ignore it. Why would you even believe that woman? Because she's your compatriot? I could hear how annoyed she was. Apparently Kagome really wanted to see Asakura and Kawashima behind bars. So as far as her information has been accurate, and what has she told you particularly sensational? Well, wanted to answer, but I realized I couldn't think of any examples. For example, some information regarding my parents' death. I thought you already suspected something. That's different. Are you saying that she's pretending to be a KGB major? I laughed, but I was starting to feel a surge of strange agitation. I even had to stand up and pace around the kitchen. That's even stupider then. Do you even have any proof that she is who she says she is? Well, she's Russian too, to start with. Do all Russians work for the KGB? Who would she work for then? Kagome turned to me and smiled mysteriously. I don't know. I decided not to react. Iwamura was clearly hinting at Kobayashi Corporation, but if that was the case, this whole situation was becoming way too complicated. And not only because I was just a student who knew nothing and posed no threat of it to anyone, but just in general, from the ontological viewpoint, so to say. Do you know what Oscam's razor is? No, but I think you're about to tell me. Call me when dinner is ready. I snapped at her, grabbing my book, and left for my room. The rest of the day was peaceful. I didn't want any more pointless conversations with Kagome, and we only saw each other again at dinner. They usually went to bed earlier than me, so I kept reading in bed for a while, enjoying the silence of the house that was becoming more and more rare with every day. Finally, my eyes closed and I easily fell asleep. I was woken by a noise from the yard, a familiar one. It only took me a moment to realize what it was. It was the noise of the planks I moved aside yesterday to let Irina out to the back alley. When I came to my senses, the silence of the night grew undisturbed once again, but I knew someone wanted to leave the house unseen. And unless Moriyuki-san was a sleepwalker, it could only be. I jumped out of bed, quickly got dressed, and chased after Kagome. Ooh, someone's sneaking around. If I had been a minute late, she would have disappeared into the endless labyrinth of alley under the cover of darkness, but I got lucky. I saw her silhouette a few dozen meters ahead and hid behind a light post. She was holding a bag. Wherever Iwamura was heading, she walked quickly and confidently. I tried desperately to remain unseen, so I had no time to wonder where Kagome was going exactly. We continued like that until we reached the station, where she stopped and looked around, but I managed to hide in the shadow of some trees. Then Kagome passed the turnstiles and walked up onto the platform. There were still trains going that late? Didn't have my wallet on me, but the ticket inspector was peacefully sleeping at his post, so I managed to jump over the turnstile unnoticed. Soon enough, a completely empty train did in fact arrive. Maybe it was some kind of overnight service to the depot. Ooh, riding the train at night time. Ooh. The trip took a while. I took one car away from Kagome, lying it down on a seat in an uncomfortable position to make sure I couldn't be seen. She spent the entire time sitting motionless, tensing staringly out somewhere in front of her. And finally, at one of the stations close to the outskirts, Kagome abruptly got up and left the carriage, so quickly that I barely managed to jump out of mine. We were in a seaside district built up on warehouses. Kagome walked forward, confidently making her way through the eerie gloom and the endless rows of identical-looking buildings. I was getting more and more uneasy by the minute, not even because I was in an unfamiliar place in the middle of the night, but because the girl I was following didn't seem to be afraid of anything at all. I know. Dun dun dun. What could be happening here? Is Kagome the kidnapper, somehow? Not everyone would want to unwittingly spy on a maniac while he satisfies his perverted desires. Oh, it's this place again, where Catherine was kidnapped. I don't know if I would have held out another half hour in this desolate place, but Kagome finally turned off toward one of the warehouses, which looked exactly like all the others. How could she tell them apart? She slid the door open and walked inside. I realized there was no way back, and then I had to follow her. Deep inside, I already knew what I would find in there. Just didn't want to put this knowledge in the form of a complete thought. Person's self-deception peaks when they learn to ignore the things quite literally right in front of them. We exclude all that is possible, which remains as true. I understood how dangerous it was to look for correlation everywhere, use it to substitute cause and effect. The rise of the average temperature of September night coincide with the rise of the central bank's key interest rate. That doesn't mean global warming will cause inflation to fall. Kagome sneaks out of the house at night while everyone is asleep and goes to the outskirts of a city, sneak into some warehouse. Maybe this did impact the inflation rate, but... Well. What do we have here, guys? We have our suspect. Our culprit. Inside the warehouse I found Ellie, tied up with Iwamura standing over her. So it was you after all. Ellie raised her head and blindly stared into the darkness. Nick, is that you? And then, in a louder voice, Nick, help! I came closer and froze, feeling unable to approach Kagome. That girl was looking at me and grinning. Welcome, Nico-san. I'd have to be blind not to notice you tailing me. So you knew? I exhaled. Of course, it'd be stupid to live with you in the same house and hope you wouldn't notice me disappearing at night. We'd better sort this out now on my terms. Nick, don't listen to her. She's crazy. Untie me. Took a step forward and stopped. Kagome was hovering over Ellie like Cerberus, refusing to let her return to the world of the living. Nick, hurry! What's the matter, Nico-san? Won't you save your princess? I guess any normal person in my shoes would have rushed to Ellie, pushing Kagome away. I rescued the heir to the Kobayashi Corporation and received a well-deserved reward. Except that the person in my shoes turned out to be me, and I had no one to ask for help. Why did you do it? Asked the kidnapper. Why, Nico-san? Do you really not understand? She frowned. How else could I make them release my father? Even if they would, do you think they'll get away with it? I don't think I have much of a choice. Nick, please. I heard the notes of desperation in Ellie's voice. I realized that I had to make a decision. The sooner the better. But Nico-san, please understand that if you let her go now, we're both doomed. Kagome said impassively. Nick, I promise I won't tell a soul about you. What about her? I blurted out. That bitch has to be punished. You see, Nico-san, and you'd take her word for it. At the moment, I was more concerned about Kagome than my own safety. Yes, her actions were hard to justify, but I didn't even want to imagine what I'd do if I were in her shoes. At the same time, I couldn't expect a fair trial, or she couldn't. Kobayashi Jun most likely wouldn't just hand Iwamura over to the police. Besides, she was most likely correct. Ellie wouldn't keep her mouth shut. And why would I believe her at all? Right now, she'd say anything to have me free her, but she could easily change her opinion once she was safe. So in a situation as extreme as this, wasn't going to think too deeply about what they saw. I was with Kagome, the Cure kidnapper, so I was guilty too. Nick, please, Ellie pleaded. I can't stop you, even if I wanted to. Kagome showed me her empty hands. Deciding someone else's fate wasn't the role I was least suited for. I was angry at Kagome for dragging me into this situation, one way or another. One way or another. I was angry at myself for not being more cautious. Even at Ellie for the same as me. Despite there was a cowardly wish to run away. Let Kagome deal with her problems herself, without involving us. Me. Just me. Well, Nico-san? Nick, please! But I was there, and I had to make a choice. Free Ellie, follow Kagome's advice. I'm going to do the right option, and I'm going to not free Ellie. Anyway, right now Ellie was acting on emotion. As soon as she was safe, she'd immediately start talking about everything that happened. And even if she wouldn't say anything, it'd soon become clear that Kawashima and her gang had nothing to do with it, and the investigation would continue. One way or another, Kagome would become the primary suspect. And then me? Sorry, I need to... I walked outside to catch my breath and sort out my thoughts. I needed a break. Kagome followed me. Well done, Nico-san, for not acting on emotion. Your compliments are the last thing I need. I snapped, not wanting to agree with her on anything right now. You can still release Kobayashi. She's waiting for you. And then what? What then? You realize you put me in a situation where I have no choice. No matter what I do, I'll end up with the one to blame. She smirked and shrugged. And what are you planning to do next? I've already told you. I'll demand they release my father. Now I have something to back up that demand. Were you also the one who left that note on Ellie's house? Of course. Kagome smiled, clearly satisfied with herself. There's only one little problem. Once you demand the release of your father, the list of suspects will narrow down very quickly. That's why I won't demand that alone. Instead, I'll ask for some secret documents concerning the project. That's clever, I whistled, but only in theory. Kobayashi Jun may be a monster, but I'm sure his granddaughter's life is more important to him than anything else. I tried to remember the emotionless, wrinkled face of the old man, but in my memory it didn't have any expression. Was such a person capable of compassion? When it came to people not related to him? Possibly not. But whenever he talked he was talking about Ellie, something changed about him. As if spring snow was melting, revealing the grass and the plants that survived under it. Nico-san? With some effort, I returned to the real world. I don't know what to think about you now. Oh, sorry I haven't met your standards, but my father's been kidnapped. You have your own truth, Ellie has her own. I just don't want to be involved in this. But you are, Nico-san. Ever since. She stopped, bit her lip, and turned away, as if she'd said more than she wanted. Ever since what? Since you let us live at your place. Kagome had clearly wanted to say something different, but I decided to not press her. Thanks, I regret it already. But Ellie was still tied up to the warehouse, definitely storing up anger not only at Iwamura, but me too. And the longer we talked, the more she accumulated. But deep inside, I began to realize that Kagome had left me no choice. For Ellie, no matter what she claimed, I was an accomplice now. I still don't like your plan, it's too obvious. Who else would want your father free? Apart from you and Moriyuki-san. Do you have any other suggestions? You know, I feel like I just found a bloody shirt and a pistol in my wardrobe, and the police are knocking at my door. Kagome laughed, and in the silence of the dark night, the laughter sounded extremely ominous. I won't be able to look her in the eye anymore, not after everything. felt like a traitor forced to collaborate with the enemy, except that I did it for my own safety rather than the other people's salvation. I guess my portrait wouldn't be next to Zoya Kamodibadibadibada. First female hero. Cool. You don't have to do it. Then why am I here? Mind explaining that? You followed me, and you pretended you didn't notice. You wanted me to be here, for Ellie to see me. Maybe. She finally agreed and looked away. But why? Why? Because her eyes flashed in the moonlight. You probably didn't want it to be just, You probably didn't want it to just be on you if you failed. What, did I get that right? I grinned, but Kagome looked genuinely upset. Oh, come on, don't pretend to be offended now. I'm the victim here. But the real victim was sat in that damn warehouse, tied to a crate. How long are you planning to keep her there? She needs water and food. And where do you think I've been going in the evenings? This is just a guess, but you can eat more than once a day, don't you? Losers are inevitable in war. But we're not at war. I flung my arms up and paced back and forth. I don't see much of a difference. And how long ago did you plan this? I didn't. If they hadn't burned my restaurant. I remembered Kawashima and Asakura, falsely accused of kidnapping. You got back at them too. If Kobayashi-jun does the right thing... Interrupted her. Do you really think you'll get away with it? Even if your father is released, old man Kobayashi won't tolerate a slight like this. You may be right. Kagome smiled sadly. But we'll think about that later. I grit my teeth and rubbed my forehead, surprised to find a splitting headache. I had to make a decision. You can't leave her here alone for the night. And if you want, you can stay and guard her until I return. I'll bring her food for 2 people, by the way. We better feed her. You asking me to do that? If you want to. Kagome responded emotionlessly. You know what? You started it, you finish it. Waited for her outside, shivering because of the cold autumn wind. I had neither the energy nor the will to look Ellie in the eyes, and I didn't know what to do next, as if I was struck with a superposition between 2 states. I couldn't let her go, but also couldn't leave things as they were. I couldn't trust Kagome, but I was also too afraid to make any decision by myself. I couldn't be with her, but my conscience wouldn't allow me to leave. The indecision was killing me, and I could feel myself drowning while standing on solid ground. Finally, Kagome walked out, carefully folding her empty bag and smirking. You seem anxious, Nico-kun. Rather. Is that all? Can we go? Of course we can, except... Did you bring your wallet? Trains don't run in this late. Had other stuff on my mind. Fine, then I'll lend you the money for a taxi, if you'd be so kind. Sometimes I've regretted that Kagome wasn't a guy so I could punch her in the face. Wait. Sometimes I regretted that Kagome wasn't a guy so I could punch in her the face without a twinge of regret. Yeah, that's a normal sentence. That's a normal sentence, right, guys? I got out of the car at the gate of my house and waited for Kagome to pay the driver. Where did she even get the money, given she said she hadn't managed to rescue anything from the fire? Let's sleep. I'm tired, Kagome said once taxi left. They're tired, are you? Sounds normal to you? Yeah, it's all good. All's good, mate. I smirked. Wait, I have a question that can't wait until tomorrow. I'm listening. She sighed. How did you manage to kidnap Ellie? She's got guards and everything. You helped me. Me? Well, indirectly, of course. I only had to find an abandoned warehouse where nobody would hear her. You're saying it like she went there herself. She did. Come on, that just sounds stupid. First I was planning to kidnap her the normal way, if you could say that, like they do in the movies. But for one, I had to do it in a way her guards wouldn't notice. And for 2, I'm a girl that don't have the strength needed to pull it off. Knocking Kobayashi out with something heavy would be one thing, but dragging her across the city? So I had a simple thought. Who was better at tricking her guards than Kobayashi herself? Suddenly, I felt I didn't want to hear what Iwamura had come up with, but the girl continued. And then, I only had to find the right motivation for Kobayashi to sneak away from her guards and come to the warehouse I'd selected. And that motivation was me? Of course, Nico-san. Kagome gave me a big smile, and despite myself, I noted how unusually beautiful she looked in the moonlight. I wrote a note in your name and attached a detailed map. I didn't know what surprised me more, Kagome's resourcefulness or Ellie's gullibility. Nico-san, won't you even accuse me of lying? Are you lying? No? Then I won't. But you weren't supposed to do... But aren't you surprised at all that the bait works so well? I saw Ellie tied up. What difference does it make how you managed to do it? Kagome was hinting at Ellie's feelings for me, but this wasn't the time to talk about it. Nico-san, I'm disappointed. I was sure you'd be more surprised. I'm sure by the fact that you're turning this into a joke. I'm quite serious when it comes to action, but it seems to me we've already figured out who the main villain here is. So now we just have to chill. And who would that be? Me, of course. Kagome proudly pushed her chest out, as if accepting a reward for finishing a school year with straight A's. We seem to be so proud about it. Trust me, I'm not happy to have to go so far, but if I am to be a villain, I'm going to do it right. Considering that innocent people suffered because of you. Innocent people? She said way too loudly for our peaceful sleeping neighborhood. I took my revenge on them too. How? After Kobayashi got your note, I left another one in her mailbox containing threats supposedly from them. Genius. I'm glad you appreciate. In reality, I simply didn't know to act around her anymore. The Japanese are clearly afraid of were creatures for a reason. And to think that just recently I started to believe we had a lot in common. But I couldn't imagine myself kidnapping a person. Especially Ellie. Although, of course, Iwamura had a very different opinion of her. Alright, it's already late. Or early. I could barely stand on my feet and just wanted to go to bed as soon as possible. We'd been gone for a few hours, but they felt like several days. Once in the kitchen, I stopped, looked around like I was seeing it for the first time, and turned to Kagome. Tomorrow. Yes, Nico-san? Her face expressed polite attention, which was totally inappropriate at that moment. I need to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. Good night, Nico-san. I didn't respond, but followed her eyes with my eyes, then drank a glass of water and went to my room. But I couldn't fall asleep, instead lying awake with that nasty feeling where sleep refuses to come and you know you'll have to lie and wait at least an hour until its return. Even despite all the exhaustion you've accumulated, so I was sharing my house with a monster. The thought didn't so much terrify me as it caused inexplicable surprise. As if I woke up one morning and suddenly realized I was no longer 18, but rather 48. Half of my life was behind me and I hadn't even noticed. Just grinding some levels before you face Xande and Cloud of Darkness on Final Fantasy III. Ooh, I wish you luck, Kuja. If I can do it, so can you, I says. I believe in yez. How can I not see what Kagome was capable of? You're like right at the end, Kuja. You're really close. And what was the limit of her determination? If she needed to sacrifice me for her father's freedom, what would stop her? And it wasn't only about that, but also the cruel and calculating way she executed her plan. I couldn't understand why Kagome hated Ellie so much, but the fact she did was in itself alarming. But it wasn't like Kagome was a maniac serial killer. All her actions followed a careful logic. If she'd been a complete stranger to me, I probably would have been impressed by her perseverance and effectiveness. Ostentatious, moralizing, and hypocrisy were alien to me. Ice cream. Oh, what kind of lies? I gotta know. What kind of ice cream are you eating? Of course, I wasn't a sociopath, but the thought that ends justify the means crossed my mind more often than it probably had to. And by turning down her offer to play bass for Z Feelsy, I basically abandoned the life path that would have led to Ellie. Maybe Kagome and I really were accomplices now. That had obviously been Kagome's goal, and she succeeded. Again. I should have felt affronted and cheated, but deep inside I only felt weariness and pity for her. If a person is mentally healthy, only other people or the circumstances of their life can push them to extreme actions. I didn't want to believe that in a world where Kagome's father had been kidnapped. At the corporation, sooner or later she would have still easily crossed the red line. What would I have done in her shoes? It was easy to judge from the side, lying in warm bed, having a blank bank account on my own, albeit old but decent house. But most importantly, my wish to help her free her father was only growing stronger, because it also suffered because of Kobayashi Corporation, because it was right, and because it was about her after all, but only within reason. With these thoughts came the long-desired slumber that felt like a reward for all my hard labor. vanilla with chocolate. Ooh, I want some. Can you share, Eliza? I'll stop over and I'll have some ice cream too. Wait, you might live far away actually. Never mind. Bad idea. I was always annoyed by my hesitation in deciding whether I wanted to continue sleeping or get up. I woke up too early, especially after the previous night, but immediately felt my brain switching into waking mode. If only people could consciously switch themselves off to rest. Dreams. After lying in bed for at least an hour, unable to decide whether to get up or not, I eventually fell asleep. And in my dream, I got into a real epic novel with a complicated storyline. Did tell a world and a backstory, plethora of characters, each with a unique and complicated personality. Rudely interrupted by Kagomi's call. Uh-oh. Nico-san, it's time to get up! And of course my memory retained only pathetic shreds of the story, apart from the fact that the dream had existed at all. Nico-san, it's surprising how the same action can cause a very different reactions, depending on the situation. Hang on a minute. Okay. I often grumbled at Himitsu for waking me up, but deep inside I was glad about it. Meanwhile, Kagomi's wake-ups irritated me more and more with each day. Why the fuck are you even talking about school after what happened yesterday? In truth, I was mostly annoyed that I'd been deprived of a continuation to that wonderful story. If only I could remember what it was about. So you aren't going? When she put it that way, it was hard to argue with her. Give me a minute to get dressed. Maybe just for a minute. Kagomi smiled and walked out of the room. There he is again. Mafia babe, why is he here, huh? Why does he keep appearing here? There was no time for breakfast, but my body wasn't awake enough to eat anyway. We walked down the familiar path to our school, while I tried to process what had happened last night. People are a mix of good and bad qualities, but under difficult circumstances, most wouldn't choose to be heroes. I know, super suspicious. What's going on here? In line with that, I'd taken what seemed to be the coward's choice, agreeing with Kagomi's mediocre arguments. At this point, any excuses I could come up with wouldn't be any better than a drunk driver's after hitting a pedestrian. So what do we do next? I finally asked, feeling like I was falling asleep on my feet. With what, Nico-san? You know what I mean. With Kobayashi? Yes, with Kobayashi. She responded without slowing down. We'll leave a note with our demands, like it says in the first. I didn't expect the first note, but this time they're definitely going to be on high alert. Yes, which is why you'll have to be the one to leave it. Kagomi looked at me and smiled. Oh yeah, of course. I wasn't even surprised. Do you actually think I won't get caught? You'll come up with something. I believe in you. She shot me a sly look and stopped. We're already close to school. Aren't you afraid we'll be seen together today? I'd completely forgot about that. I think we have more important problems to think about. Well then, Kagomi stepped over and wrapped her arm around mine. Do you mind if we walk like this? Now this is too much. I tried to release my arm, but the girl wouldn't let go. What's come over you? I guess this was Kagomi's attempt to distract my attention from the fact that she'd been bestowed upon me the honor of delivering her ransom demands. To distract me, walk with me to school, hand in hand, and leave me alone with that thought, as if confirming its legitimacy. A common cause brings people together. A common crime, I said, almost whispering. Have you decided what exactly you're going to demand? What documents? We've already tried to go through one stack of papers, and they could just give us any pseudo-scientific garbage. How would you know whether the tables and grass inside have any real value? Do you think they know that Kobayashi was kidnapped by high school students? I didn't want to press her, but my questions seemed reasonable. Besides, I doubt Kobayashi Jun would risk his granddaughter's life. She smirked despairingly. I think you're the one at the greatest risk. Kidnappers theoretically should be prepared to make good on their threats. Are you ready to kill Ellie if her grandfather won't release your father? Oh, we're here already, she exclaimed, released my arm, and ran a couple meters ahead. Well, Nico-san, I've got stuff to do before class. See you later. I got some kidnappy things to do. Having said that, she hurried to school, leaving me in the yard with other students who didn't care at all whether we came together or not. I walked up to her classroom and sat behind my desk. The other kids seemed to be very agitated. It's not like a person gets kidnapped every day. At least same, no less. Except that they thought it was Kawashima's and Asakura's fault. None of them knew who the mastermind really was. I did, though, and now I was her accomplice. Of course, I could reason that I was still a victim of the circumstances, but ask those who are without sin to throw the first stone at you, and you'll definitely receive with more than one rock to the forehead. Everybody exaggerates the flaws of others and stubbornly ignores their own. If we exclude outright villains, the most controversial heroes of literature are criticized most by those who unconsciously notice similarities to themselves, but desperately don't want to admit it. But if we were caught and taken to court, whether it was swift revenge from Kobayashi Corporation or protracted investigation within the Japanese judicial system, none of these arguments would help me. The best I could do at that moment was to hand myself over to the police. I would spend several years in prison and walk away a free man with a clear conscience. That was the best from society's point of view, but to be more precise, I'd always believed that the needs of the majority eventually prevail over the struggle of a minority. In addition, over a considerable period of time, great personalities light up and fade out like flashes of light, while simple individuals merge into a humongous Higgs field that serves only as a substract for the history we see. But at this moment I was one of the bosoms that form the field, one of the many but still unique to myself. I could acknowledge the superiority of moral norms and laws that all I wanted, while not facing them personally, not presented with a difficult choice right now. I had zero desire to act like homo socials and confirm people's theories with my actions. Nagging at me, I was foolish to think about what I would feel if everything would be over. Never been in a situation like this before. Could rely on the experience of characters from books. Those were created through nothing but their authors' imaginations, who most likely had never lived through extreme situations that they were writing about. Besides, we hadn't murdered anyone. We're just going to hold Ellie hostage until her grandfather released Kagomi's father. I kept trying to find excuses for what I was about to do. Classes went by casually, although I couldn't care less about the teachers and their monotonous lectures. 6 hours weren't enough to come up with anything resembling a sensible plan. I waited for Kagomi at the school gate with a feeling of dread. We could be under surveillance. That was the only thing that had come into my mind the whole day. Finally, Kagomi walked out of school, and I immediately darted off, not waiting for her. "Nico-san, wait!" She caught up and walked alongside me. "Well, have you come up with a way to leave the note? Haven't you thought that we might be watched? It's one thing to sneak out of the house through the yard at night, but showing up at Kobayashi Corporation's headquarters in broad daylight is something else entirely. Then maybe we should drop it in the post box at Kobayashi Estate." She gave it a thought. Even better, there's at least other people in the city at the time of day, but we'd completely alone there. "Not we, you," Kagomi corrected me calmly. "Yes, and I still can't get why you've bestowed me with that honor. It's not like I have any special skills to handle it. Anyone can bring on a note." "Nico-san," she said slowly, as if I had something utterly idiotic, said something, and then it dawned on me. Yes, anyone. Kagomi gave me a questioning look. Doesn't have to be you or me. An expensive car passed by honking at someone. Who then? We can find a homeless guy, give him some money. And if he gets caught, the most he can say is some young people paid him to pass on a note. There's a lot of young people in Tokyo. Not many like you. Kagomi smiled meaningfully. Even then, I felt silent, thinking about her words. That's yet another reason not to involve me. Why? Because there are indeed fewer tall Europeans in Tokyo then? Looked at Kagomi from head to toe and didn't finish. Fewer? Fewer than who, Nico-san? You know what I mean. Fewer than there are short Japanese girls? Is that what you wanted to say, Nico-san? No. Calm down, I'm just joking. She smirked. You come up with a good plan, so I agree. I immediately felt relief, as if the school project I'd spent so much time on was finally accepted as I got a passing grade. We need to change our clothes. Our school uniform was its distinct color and style, which significantly narrowed down the number of suspects. On the contrary, Kagomi's casual clothes were so unremarkable that even if our hobo weren't memorized it, virtually every other girl would fit the description. You know, this idea doesn't seem to be so ingenious to me anymore. You're telling me. What now? We're standing in the square in front of Kobayashi Corporation's headquarters, and for a while I even forgot about the sense of guilt I had for Ellie. Your own plan working is a little intoxicating. Several moments will get you well-deserved reward, but the dopamine kit often doesn't correlate with the effects you put in. Finding a homeless guy wasn't only half of the work, and this plan only somewhat decreased our risk. I no longer cared. Just ahead of me could see success of the operation and Ellie prompt release. Sooner we let her go, the forgivable our crime. Too late to back out. But it isn't too late to end stream, though. Yep, it's been 3 hours, guys, and I'm going to call it there. Yeah, things are getting kind of crazy now with this game. Things are getting pretty flippin' crazy. No, I know. More tomorrow, Mafia. Much, much more tomorrow. Still a lot of songs. Backgrounds. I think we got a few more backgrounds. Yeah. And CG. Once again, a couple more. Oh god, there's still so many here. Couple more CGs though. Oh yeah. Thank you all for stopping by, everyone. Like I said, more of this game tomorrow. Maybe we'll finish it. Maybe we'll be close to finishing her Kagomi's roots or something. Who knows, right? Who knows what's gonna happen. But yeah, I'll be back tonight with some Golden Sun, so look forward to that. So yeah, look forward to that, guys. I love you all, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye!